My daughter replaced me with her rich stepfather for the father-daughter dance at her wedding. Laughing, "You are outdated." I walked away silently, but a few hours later I gave a speech, after which the guests began to boo and my daughter ran out of the hall crying because she realized she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. My name is Luther Banks. I am 70 years old, and for 3 decades I laid bricks, poured concrete, and broke my back to build a future for the little girl who just treated me like a stranger at her own wedding. Before I tell you how I turned her perfect day into her worst nightmare, please tell me in the comments where you are watching from and hit that like button if you believe respect is earned, not bought. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Plaza Hotel ballroom were blindingly bright, almost as bright as the diamond necklace my daughter Maya was wearing. I knew exactly how much that necklace cost, because I was the one who paid for it, anonymously, just like I had paid for the $50,000 deposit on this venue 2 weeks ago. But nobody here knew that. To the 200 guests sipping champagne and eating caviar, I was just Luther, the old black man in the corner wearing a suit that went out of style in the 90s. I sat at table 25, a small round table pushed so far back I could practically smell the bleach from the restrooms, and hear the kitchen staff arguing about dishwashing duty. It did not matter, though. I was not here for the lobster or the expensive wine. I was here to walk my baby girl down the aisle and share that one special dance every father dreams of. I had been practicing. For 3 weeks in my living room, I had been listening to "The Way You Look Tonight," trying to get my old knees to move smoothly. I wanted to make her proud. The MC voice boomed through the speakers, silencing the chatter of the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, please turn your attention to the dance floor. It is time for a very special tradition. Please welcome our beautiful bride, Maya, and her father for the father-daughter dance." My heart leaped into my throat. This was it. I stood up, my hands trembling slightly as I buttoned my jacket. It was a charcoal gray suit I had bought 10 years ago for my church deacon ordination. I had dry cleaned it twice just for today. I smoothed down the lapels, took a deep breath, and stepped out from the shadows of table 25. I saw Maya standing in the center of the dance floor under the spotlight. She looked like an angel. Her white dress flowed around her like a cloud, and her skin glowed. I smiled the kind of smile that hurts your cheeks because it is full of so much love and pride. I started walking toward her, navigating through the maze of tables. I could see the guests looking at me. Some looked confused, wondering who the old man with the calloused hands and the slight limp was. Others just looked away, indifferent. I was 10 feet away when I extended my hand. "Maya, baby, I am ready," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. But Maya did not take my hand. She did not even look at me. Her eyes slid right past my face, as if I were made of glass, as if I were invisible. Her gaze locked onto someone behind me. Preston, my ex-wife Vanessa's new husband. A tall white man with a tan that looked like it came from a bottle in a tuxedo that probably cost more than my first car. He strode past me, his shoulder brushing against mine with enough force to make me stumble slightly. He did not apologize. He did not even acknowledge my existence. He just walked straight to my daughter and took the hand I had reached out for. The room went silent, or maybe it was just my ears ringing. I stood there, my hand still extended in midair, looking like a fool. Maya smiled at Preston, a dazzling smile she used to save for me when I would come home covered in dust and mortar from a 12-hour shift. Preston laughed, a loud, booming sound that grated on my nerves. "Sit down, Luther," he said, loud enough for the tables nearby to hear. "You are ruining the frame. The photographer needs a clean shot of the real family." The real family. The words hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I looked at Maya, waiting for her to defend me, waiting for her to say, "No, this is my father Luther, the man who raised me alone for 15 years, the man who braided my hair and learned to cook soul food because my mother left us." But she did not. She leaned in close to me, her face hardening. Her whisper was sharp like a serpentine hiss. "Dad, please just go sit down," she hissed. "You are outdated." Preston fits the image. "Look at you. Your suit is old, your shoes are scuffed, and you look like you just came from a construction site." Preston is classy. He matches the level of elegance Connor and I are trying to project today. "Do not embarrass me." I froze. I looked at my shoes. They were polished. I had spent an hour shining them last night until I could see my reflection in the black leather. They were not scuffed. They were just old quality leather that had walked miles to make sure she had braces on her teeth and books for school. I looked up at Connor, my new son-in-law. He was standing by the DJ booth looking confused. He took a half step forward as if to intervene, but Maya shot him a warning glare that stopped him in his tracks. Connor was a good kid, a software engineer with a kind heart, but he was terrified of Maya when she got like this. Outdated. That was the word she used. Not dad, not father. Outdated, like an old tool you throw in the trash when you buy a shiny new one. I lowered my hands slowly. The music started playing. It was not The Way You Look Tonight. It was some modern classical piece. I did not recognize something pretentious and stiff. Preston swept Maya into his arms, spinning her around with a practiced ease that reeked of ballroom lessons and arrogance. The guests applauded. They clapped for the lie. They clapped for the stepfather who had entered her life 4 years ago when she was already an adult. They clapped for the man who I knew for a fact had not contributed a single dime to her upbringing. I felt a burning sensation behind my eyes, but I refused to let a single tear fall. Not here, not in front of these people who judged value by the cut of a suit rather than the content of a character. I turned around. My movements were slow and deliberate. I did not run. I did not storm off. I walked with the dignity of a man who knows exactly who he is, even if his own child has forgotten. I made my way toward the back of the room, toward the dimly lit bar area that felt a million miles away from the spotlight. Every step took me further away from the daughter I thought I knew. 30 years. That is how long I had been her father. I remembered the night she was born in a county hospital in Chicago. I remembered holding her tiny body in my large, rough hands, terrified I would crush her. I remembered promising her that I would build the world for her. And I did. I started as a laborer mixing cement. I worked my way up to foreman, then supervisor, then I started my own contracting company, Banks Construction. I built half the schools and community centers in our neighborhood. I saved every penny. I drove a beat-up Ford truck so she could drive a safe sedan to college. I lived in a small apartment so I could pay her tuition at Harvard in cash. I never told her how much money I really had. I wanted her to value hard work. I wanted her to build her own character. I guess I failed at that. I reached the bar and sat on a stool in the shadows. The bartender, a young man with a kind face, looked at me with pity. I hated pity. Whiskey neat, I said, my voice sounding gravelly and foreign to my own ears. As I watched them dance from the darkness, the anger began to rise. It was not a hot, fiery anger. It was cold. It was the cold, heavy feeling of concrete setting in your veins. They thought I was just a broke, retired construction worker. They thought I was a prop to be moved around and discarded when I did not fit the aesthetic. I looked at Preston spinning my daughter. He was laughing, whispering something in her ear that made her giggle. He looked like a king holding court. But I knew something about Preston Sterling that Maya did not. I knew he was a fraud. I knew because before I signed that $50,000 check for the venue deposit, I had done what any good contractor does before starting a job. I inspected the foundation. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. It was an old-looking case, but the phone inside was the latest model. I opened my email and looked at the report my private investigator had sent me 3 days ago. Preston Sterling. Multiple bankruptcies, 3 lawsuits for fraud pending in Florida, and a gambling debt that was so large it made my stomach turn. Maya thought she was marrying into royalty. She thought she was replacing her outdated blue-collar father with a high-society patriarch. She had no idea she was dancing with a wolf who was wearing a tuxedo I had indirectly paid for. The song ended. The room erupted in applause again. I saw Preston kiss Maya on the forehead, a gesture so performative it made me nauseous. Then he grabbed the microphone. "Thank you, everyone," he boomed, his voice slick with false charm. That was magical. You know, when Maya asked me to step in for this dance, I was honored. It takes a real man to step up when others cannot meet the standard. He looked directly at me sitting in the dark corner of the bar. He smiled, a cruel, predatory smile. My grip tightened on the whiskey glass until I thought it might shatter. He was mocking me. He was kicking a man he thought was down. I took a sip of the whiskey, letting the burn settle in my chest. They wanted a show. They wanted elegance. They wanted class. Well, I was about to teach them a lesson about class. Real class is not about expensive suits or lies. Real class is about truth, and I was about to serve them a platter of cold, hard truth that would give them indigestion for the rest of their lives. I checked the time. It was 7:30. The speeches were scheduled for 8 o'clock. I had 30 minutes. 30 minutes to decide if I should walk away and let her live her lie or if I should burn the house down to save her from the fire. I looked at Maya again. She was beaming, surrounded by bridesmaids complimenting her on how modern and chic the dance was. She looked happy, but it was the happiness of a child eating candy before dinner, unaware of the stomach ache that was coming. Then I saw Vanessa, my ex-wife, approaching my table. She was wearing a red dress that was too tight and too bright. She walked with a sway that suggested she had already had a few too many cocktails. She slammed her clutch down on the bar next to my drink. "You should leave, Luther," she said, not even looking at me. "You are depressing the atmosphere. Preston is upset that you are still here looming in the corner like a dark cloud." I turned my stool slowly to face her. Vanessa, still beautiful in a hard, sharp way, looked at me with pure disdain. "This is my daughter's wedding, Vanessa," I said calmly. "I paid for the deposit." She laughed a harsh barking sound. "You paid a fraction, Luther. Preston paid for the rest. Preston paid for the flowers, the food, the band. He is the one making this happen. That little bit of money you scraped together from your pension is cute, but it does not buy you a seat at the head table." I stared at her. She really believed it. She really believed Preston was footing the bill. "Go home, Luther," she sneered, leaning in close, her perfume overpowering the smell of my whiskey. "Go back to your little apartment and watch TV. Let the people who belong here enjoy the night. If you make a scene, I swear I will make sure you never see your future grandchildren." That was the final straw. That threat right there. She threatened the only thing I had left to look forward to. I looked her dead in the eye. "I am not going anywhere, Vanessa. And tell Preston to enjoy the champagne. It might be the last expensive thing he drinks for a very long time." Vanessa rolled her eyes and stomped away back to the world of illusion she was so desperate to be part of. I turned back to my drink. My decision was made. I was not going to leave. I was going to wait. I was going to let them eat their cake and drink their wine, and then when they were full and happy and arrogant, I was going to take the microphone. I pulled out my phone again and sent a text message to my assistant who manages my investment portfolio. "Authorize the transaction," I typed, "and send the file to the projector system in the ballroom. We are going live at 8:15. I hit send and watched the little bubble disappear. The outdated old man was about to update everyone on the reality of the situation. The father-daughter dance was over, but the real show was just about to begin. I watched Vanessa disappear into the crowd of laughing guests and took a deep breath that rattled in my chest. The air in the ballroom was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and fresh lilies, but beneath it all I could taste the bitterness of my own humiliation. I picked up my glass of whiskey, not to drink it, but just to have something to hold, something solid in a world that suddenly felt like it was dissolving into smoke. It was time to find my seat. I knew I could not stay at the bar forever. The dinner service was starting, and the waiters were already circulating with silver trays held high above their heads like offerings to pagan gods. I stood up, my knees popping slightly, a reminder of the decades I spent kneeling on concrete floors, laying tiles so my daughter could walk on marble. I navigated the room searching for my name card. Table 1 was front and center, draped in gold silk, where Preston sat like a king next to Maya. Table 2 and 3 were filled with Preston's business associates, men in Italian suits who laughed too loudly and women who looked at their reflections in their silverware. I walked past table 10, then table 15. The further I walked, the darker the room seemed to get. The crystal centerpieces became smaller. The tablecloths looked less crisp. By the time I reached the 20s, I was in the hinterlands of the ballroom, far from the warmth of the spotlight. Finally, I found it. Table 25. It was a small, wobbly, round table pushed aggressively into the back corner. To my left was the swinging metal door of the kitchen. Every few seconds, it would fly open with a gust of hot air carrying the smell of grease and shouting cooks. To my right was the entrance to the men's restroom. The door was propped open slightly, and the chemical sting of lemon bleach wafted out, mixing unpleasantly with the aroma of the appetizers. There were no other guests at table 25, just me. It was the table for the leftovers, the table for the people you had to invite but wished would not come. I pulled out the metal chair, which scraped loudly against the floor, and sat down. From this vantage point, the head table looked like a distant planet. I could see Maya laughing, her head thrown back her neck, exposing the diamond necklace I had bought. She looked radiant. She looked happy, and she looked completely oblivious to the fact that her father was sitting next to a toilet. I stared at Preston. He was standing up now, tapping a spoon against his champagne glass to get everyone's attention. He was making a toast. To my beautiful daughter, he boomed, his voice amplified by the speakers. And to the incredible future we are building together. I spared no expense today because Maya deserves the world. The room erupted in applause. "Bravo, Preston," someone shouted. "What a generous man!" I felt a bile rise in my throat. Generous. That was the word they used. I closed my eyes and the memory washed over me as clear as day. It was just last week, Tuesday morning. I was sitting in my small home office, the one with the peeling wallpaper, because I had not bothered to renovate it since I retired. My phone rang. It was the wedding planner, a nice woman named Sarah, who sounded like she was on the verge of a panic attack. "Mr. Banks," she had said, her voice trembling. "I am so sorry to bother you, but we have a problem. The final deposit for the venue and the catering is due today. I have tried calling Mr. Sterling, but his card was declined and he is not answering his phone. If we do not get the $50,000 by noon, we will have to cancel the reservation." Cancel. The word hung in the air. I imagined Maya's face if her dream wedding was canceled. I imagined her tears. I imagined her embarrassment. I did not hesitate, not for a second. "How much do you need, Sarah?" I asked. $50,000, she whispered. I pulled out my checkbook, the one linked to the investment account I had built over 40 years of sweating in the summer sun and freezing in the winter winds. $50,000 was a lot of money. It was money I had set aside for my own medical bills for the day my back finally gave out for good. But for Maya, I would have given my last breath. "I will bring you a cashier's check within the hour," I told Sarah. "But Sarah, you have to promise me one thing. Anything, Mr. Banks. This comes from an anonymous donor, a family friend. Do not tell Maya. Do not tell Preston. Just tell them it was taken care of. I do not want them to worry. I wanted to save her dignity. I wanted her day to be perfect. I did not want her to know that her rich stepfather was broke or that her outdated father was the one saving the day. I signed that check with a hand that was steady and sure-driven by a love that asked for nothing in return. And now, sitting here at table 25, smelling the bleach and the grease, I watched Preston take a bow for my sacrifice. He was drinking the wine I paid for. He was standing on the floor I rented. He was basking in the admiration I had purchased. And I was the one hiding in the corner. A waiter rushed past me, kicking the leg of my chair. "Excuse me," he muttered without looking back. He dropped a basket of bread rolls on my table. They were cold. I picked one up, turning it over in my hand like a stone. This was my portion. Cold bread and silence. I looked up and saw movement near the head table. It was Connor, my son-in-law. He was a good kid, really. A bit soft, maybe. He worked with computers and had hands as smooth as paper, but he loved Maya. I could see it in the way he looked at her. But right now, he was not looking at Maya. He was looking at me. He was squinting into the darkness, trying to find me. When our eyes finally met, I saw a flash of shame cross his face. He leaned over and whispered something to Maya, but she was too busy laughing at something Preston said. Connor stood up. He adjusted his tie, looking nervous. He started walking toward me. He had to weave through the tables, apologizing as he bumped into chairs. He looked out of place in this room full of sharks, this gentle boy who just wanted to write code and live a quiet life. As he got closer, I saw the conflict in his eyes. He knew this was wrong. He knew sitting me by the toilet was a slap in the face. "Luther," he said when he reached my table. His voice was low, respectful. "I am so sorry about the seating arrangement. I told Maya we should move you up front, but she said the chart was already finalized and—" He stopped. He did not want to repeat what she had really said. I knew what she had said. I could hear her voice in my head as clearly as if she were standing right there. "It is okay, Connor," I said, forcing a smile I did not feel. "I can see everything from here. It is a good vantage point." Connor looked at the swinging kitchen door, then at the bathroom. He looked like he wanted to cry. "Can I get you anything? A drink? Something from the main bar? The wine back here is... well, I think they forgot to stock this station." Before I could answer, I saw a flash of white movement. Maya was there. She had crossed the room faster than I thought possible in that big dress. She grabbed Connor by the arm, her fingers digging into his tuxedo jacket. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "I was just saying hello to your dad," Connor stammered. He is sitting all alone, Maya. Look at where they put him. Maya did not look at me. She kept her eyes locked on her husband. We are in the middle of dinner service, Connor. The photographer is taking candid shots of the head table. You cannot just wander off. But Maya, look at this table, Connor insisted. It is by the bathroom. So what? Maya snapped. It is a seat. He is lucky he is even here after the way he embarrassed me on the dance floor. I embarrassed you, I thought. I embarrassed you by existing. Maya pulled Connor closer, her face inches from his. Listen to me. Today is about image. We are sitting with the Sterlings. We are royalty today, Connor. Do not bring down our value by mingling with the low class. People are watching. Low class. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. I looked at my hands resting on the cheap tablecloth. These low-class hands had built the roof over her head. These low-class hands had signed the checks that paid for her braces, her piano lessons, her Harvard degree. These low-class hands had wiped her tears when her first boyfriend broke her heart. And now I was just debris, something to be swept under the rug so the royalty could shine. Connor looked at me, his eyes begging for forgiveness. I nodded slightly, giving him permission to go. I did not want to cause a scene. Not yet. Go on, son, I said softly. Go be royalty. Maya did not even say goodbye. She just turned on her heel, dragging Connor back toward the light, back toward the lies. I watched them go. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not pain anymore. It was clarity. It was the feeling of a fog lifting, revealing the sharp, jagged edges of reality. I sat there for another 20 minutes. The waiters brought out the main course, filet mignon for the front tables. I watched them serve plates of steaming, juicy steak to Preston and his friends. When the waiter finally got to table 25, he placed a plate of rubbery chicken in front of me. Sorry, we ran out of the steak, he mumbled. This is the vendor meal. I looked at the chicken. I did not touch it. I was not hungry. My stomach was churning with a mix of anger and adrenaline. I needed to clear my head. I needed to splash some cold water on my face and decide what my next move would be. I pushed my chair back and stood up. My legs felt heavy. I walked the 3 steps to the restroom entrance. I pushed the door open. It was a fancy bathroom with marble sinks and gold faucets meant to impress. It was empty. Or so I thought. I walked to the sink and turned on the tap. The cold water felt good on my wrists. I splashed some on my face, trying to wash away the feeling of Maya words. Low class, outdated, embarrassed. Then I heard it. A voice coming from the handicap stall at the far end of the room. A voice I recognized instantly. Listen to me, you bloodsucker, I told you I have it under control. It was Preston. I froze. My hand hovered over the faucet. I turned the water off slowly, making sure not to make a sound. The bathroom was silent, except for the heavy breathing coming from the stall. I know I am late, Preston hissed, but you have to give me until Monday. The wedding is today. Do you have any idea how much cash is floating around this room right now? I leaned in closer, my heart pounding against my ribs. Who was he talking to? Yeah, the gifts, the envelopes. I have already seen the pile. There is easily 50-60 grand in cash in that box. I am going to take it tonight. I will wire you your cut first thing in the morning. Just get off my back. My blood ran cold. He was planning to steal the wedding money. The money meant for Maya and Connor to start their new life. He was going to take it to pay off his debts. But that was not all. What about the mortgage? The voice on the other end must have asked, because Preston laughed a dry, humorless sound. The house? Do not worry about the house. I told you I have a plan for that too. He paused, and I could hear the sound of him pacing in the small stall. The old man, Preston said. Luther. Yeah, the father. He is a nobody. I have seen the way he looks. He is practically 1 foot in the grave. I have got Maya convinced that he is senile. Once we get power of attorney over his affairs, that building he owns, the one he thinks is worthless, I found out it is sitting on prime real estate. We are going to sell it out from under him. He will be dead or in a home within a year anyway. I stopped breathing. The room spun. He was not just stealing the wedding gifts. He was planning to steal my life. He was planning to declare me incompetent, take my property, and throw me away like garbage. And Maya was convinced I was senile. She was part of it. Or she was so blinded by his fake glitter that she could not see the knife he was holding to our throats. I stood there in the silence of the bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The old man, the nobody, the low-class, outdated father. Preston flushed the toilet. I heard the lock on the stall door click. I had seconds to react. I could confront him right now. I could smash his face into the marble sink. God knows I wanted to. But that would just make me the violent, crazy old man he wanted everyone to think I was. No. That was too easy. That was too quick. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I hit the voice memo app. It was still recording. I had turned it on instinctively the moment I walked into the bathroom, hoping to catch him in a lie. I had caught him in a confession. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and stepped quickly into the shadow of the towel alcove just as Preston swung the stall door open. He walked to the sink, adjusting his tie, looking at himself in the mirror with a smug satisfaction. He did not see me. He washed his hands, whistling a tune, the same tune the band was playing outside. He looked like a man who had won. He thought he had the money. He thought he had the girl. He thought he had the fool of a father-in-law cornered and beaten. He dried his hands on a paper towel and tossed it on the floor, missing the trash can completely. He laughed softly to himself, then turned and walked out the door, back to the party, back to the applause. I stepped out of the shadows. I looked at the paper towel on the floor. I looked at the door he had just walked through. "You think I am a nobody, Preston," I whispered to the empty room. "You think I am dead." I reached for my phone and stopped the recording. "Well, I have got news for you. I am not dead. I am just waking up." I walked to the door and pushed it open. The noise of the party hit me like a wave. The laughter, the music, the clinking of glasses. It all sounded different now. It sounded like a battlefield. And I was done hiding in the trenches. I adjusted my outdated suit. I squared my shoulders. I was Luther Banks. I had built skyscrapers from nothing. I had survived winters that froze the marrow in your bones. I had raised a daughter on my own. And I was about to tear this entire charade down brick by brick. I walked out of the bathroom, not toward table 25, but toward the center of the room. It was time to go to work. I walked back to table 25, but I did not feel like the same man who had left it 10 minutes ago. My legs were steady now. The tremor in my hands was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve that settled in my gut like wet concrete. The ballroom was still loud, filled with the clinking of silverware and the murmur of polite conversation, but the sound seemed distant to me, muffled by the roar of the truth I had just uncovered in that bathroom stall. I sat down in the metal chair, my back to the swinging kitchen door. I pulled my phone out of my inner jacket pocket. To anyone passing by, it looked like a relic. It was thick, clunky, and encased in a worn leather holster that I had owned for 15 years. Maya had laughed at it last Christmas. She had bought me a sleek glass slab of a phone and told me to join the 21st century. I accepted her gift, but I kept my SIM card in this old beast. She did not know that inside this rugged casing was a customized operating system, encrypted and secure, the kind used by high-level contractors and government officials. It was just like me, rough on the outside, but powerful where it counted. I pressed the playback button on the voice memo app, holding the speaker low against my ear. Through the static, I heard Preston's voice again, clear and damning. "I tricked the girl. After the wedding, I will take the gift money and pay off the debt. And old Luther, he is dying anyway. I will handle the rest of his house." The words twisted in my stomach like a rusty knife. Dying. He thought I was dying. And worse, he thought my property, the building I had bought with my first big paycheck 30 years ago, was just some scrap to be scavenged. That building was not just bricks and mortar. It was my legacy. It was a 4-story walk-up in a neighborhood that was rough back then, but was now the hottest real estate in the city. I had kept the rents low for the families who lived there because I knew what it was like to struggle. Preston saw it only as a pile of cash to clear his gambling debts. I looked across the room at him. He was standing by the bridal table, one hand resting possessively on Maya's shoulder while he charmed a group of elderly aunts. He threw his head back and laughed, his white teeth gleaming under the chandeliers. He looked the part, the doting stepfather, the successful provider, the savior. It was a masterclass in deception. If I had not walked into that bathroom, I might have eventually believed it myself. I might have believed that I was just a bitter old man, jealous of the younger, richer guy. But the recording in my hand was the antidote to his poison. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, patting it gently. It was no longer just a phone. It was a weapon, and I was sitting on a nuclear bomb. I picked up my fork and stabbed a piece of the cold, rubbery chicken. I chewed slowly, my eyes never leaving Preston. I watched him whisper something to Maya and saw her face light up with adoration. It broke my heart. My little girl, who used to run to me with scraped knees, was now running into the arms of a wolf because she liked the shine of his coat. She thought she was upgrading. She thought she was trading a rusty old pickup truck for a Ferrari. She did not realize the Ferrari had no engine and the brakes were cut. Suddenly, a shadow fell over my table, blocking the limited light I had in my corner. The smell of gardenias and expensive gin hit me before I even looked up. Vanessa. My ex-wife stood there looming over me like a storm cloud in a red designer dress. She was 65, but she fought every year of it with surgeries, fillers, and injections. Her face was smooth and tight, pulled back into a permanent expression of surprise and disdain. She held a glass of white wine in one hand, her knuckles white against the stem. "You are still eating," she said. Her voice was not a question, it was an accusation. I put down my fork and wiped my mouth with the paper napkin. "Hello, Vanessa. It is a wedding. People usually eat at weddings." She did not smile. She glanced around nervously, as if being seen talking to me would lower her credit score. "Look, Luther, I am going to make this simple. We appreciate you coming. It was quaint. But the speeches are coming up soon. The real speeches." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "The real speeches," I repeated. "You mean the ones given by the people who paid for this party?" Her eyes narrowed. "Do not start with me, Luther. We all know you chipped in, and that is sweet, really. But let us be honest, you do not fit in here. Look at you." She waved her hand at me, gesturing at my suit, my tie, my scuffed hands. "You look like you just walked off a construction site and threw on a costume." "This is a black tie event, Luther. Preston is wearing a custom tuxedo from Milan. The guests at his table are investors, doctors, politicians. And you are sitting here." She paused, looking at the bathroom door next to me, smelling like bleach. I felt the old anger rise, the same anger I felt 30 years ago when she told me she was leaving because she could not be married to a man who came home with dirt under his fingernails. She wanted the high life. She wanted parties and galas. I wanted a home and a family. "My suit is fine, Vanessa," I said, my voice steady. "It is wool. Italian wool, actually. I bought it 15 years ago, but quality lasts. Unlike some things," she scoffed, taking a sip of her wine. "You always were stubborn. Listen to me. Preston is uncomfortable. He feels bad for you, obviously. He thinks it is sad that you are sitting back here all alone. He does not want Maya to feel guilty on her big day looking at her sad, lonely father. So do us all a favor. Finish your chicken and go." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Go home, Luther, before you embarrass yourself further." You had your moment. You walked her halfway down the aisle before Preston took over. That is enough. Do not ruin the rest of the night with your presence. I looked at her. Really looked at her. Beneath the makeup and the jewelry, I saw the same woman who had left our 5-year-old daughter crying in her crib because she had a date with a banker. I saw a woman who had spent her entire life chasing an image, terrified that someone might see the cracks in the foundation. She thought she was protecting Maya, but she was just protecting her own delusion. She needed Preston to be rich. She needed him to be perfect. Because if he was a fraud, then she was a fool, and Vanessa would rather be dead than be a fool. I picked up my water glass and took a slow sip. "You know, Vanessa," I said quietly, "you are right about one thing. This table does smell like bleach, but at least it is clean. The air up there at the head table, it smells like something rotting." Her jaw dropped slightly. "Excuse me." I stood up slowly, towering over her. She took a step back, her confidence faltering for a split second. I said, "I am not leaving. Not yet. I have a gift for Maya. A very special gift. I think she needs to open it before the night is over." Vanessa laughed nervously. "A gift? What is it?" "Another homemade birdhouse. A savings bond for $50. Luther, please." Preston gave her a necklace worth more than your truck. I smiled. It was a cold smile, one that did not reach my eyes. "Oh, this gift is worth much more than a necklace, Vanessa. This gift is priceless. It is the truth." She stared at me confused and irritated. "You are talking nonsense. You are drunk." "I am stone cold sober," I said. "And I promise you, Vanessa, by the time I walk out those doors tonight, everyone in this room will know exactly what Preston Sterling is worth. And they will know exactly what Luther Banks is worth." Vanessa glared at me, her face flushing red under the layers of foundation. "You are a bitter, pathetic old man. If you ruin this for Maya, I will never forgive you. You never forgave me for being a bricklayer, Vanessa, I said softly. But bricks build houses, lies just dig graves. She huffed, spinning on her heel and marching back toward the light. I watched her go. She went straight to Preston, whispering something in his ear. He looked up at me across the room. His eyes were dark, menacing. He said something to the security guard standing near the stage. The guard, a large man with a thick neck, nodded and started moving toward my side of the room. They were going to try to throw me out. I sat back down. I checked the time on my phone. 8:00. The speeches were starting in 5 minutes. I opened my text messages. My assistant had replied, "Everything is ready, boss. The projector is linked. The bank statements are uploaded. Just say the word." I looked at the security guard getting closer. I looked at Preston raising his glass for another toast. I looked at Maya smiling that blind, beautiful smile. I was not going to leave. I was going to finish my chicken, and then I was going to burn their house of cards to the ground. The guard reached my table. "Sir," he said, his voice flat, "Mr. Sterling has asked that you be escorted out. He feels you have had too much to drink." I looked up at the guard. I recognized him. I had hired his father 20 years ago when nobody else would give him a job. "Hello, Marcus," I said. The guard froze. He squinted at me in the dim light. "Mr. Banks." I nodded. "Your dad still drive that Chevy I fixed for him?" Marcus' face softened. He looked from me to Preston, then back to me. "Yes, sir, he does." I did not know it was you back here. They told me it was some drunk crasher." "I am not drunk, Marcus, and I am not crashing. I paid for this room." Marcus stood up straighter. He turned his back to me, blocking Preston view. "Then stay as long as you want, Mr. Banks. I will tell him you are waiting for a cab. But watch your back, sir. That guy on stage, he has got eyes like a snake." "I know, Marcus," I said, gripping my phone. "I know." Marcus walked away, pretending to speak into his radio. I was safe for now. I had a few minutes. I took one last look at the recording on my phone. The file name was simply The Truth. I pressed my thumb against the screen, ready to cast it. The timeline was set. The players were in position. The outdated old man was about to show them what happens when you underestimate the person who poured the foundation you are standing on. I waited for the music to die down. I waited for the silence. And then I prepared to speak. The spotlight on the stage shifted, turning the white tablecloths into blinding sheets of ice. I sat in the darkness of table 25, watching the beam of light find its target. It landed squarely on Preston Sterling. He stood in the center of the room, microphone in hand, looking every bit the benevolent patriarch he pretended to be. His tuxedo fit perfectly tailored to hide the softness of a man who had never done a day of physical labor in his life. He raised a hand, silencing the crowd like a conductor quieting an orchestra. "Thank you, everyone," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I look around this room tonight, and I am overwhelmed. When Maya came to me a year ago and told me she wanted a fairy tale wedding, I told her one thing. I said, 'Darling, for you the sky is the limit.'" The crowd murmured in appreciation. I saw women at the nearby tables clutching their chests, eyes wide with admiration. They saw a generous stepfather, a hero. I took a sip of my water, trying to wash down the bitter taste in my mouth. They did not know the truth. They did not know that the man standing on that stage was a parasite, and they certainly did not know who the real provider was. My mind drifted back 10 years. I remembered sitting in a small, cramped office at the Ridgeview Rehabilitation Center. Across from me sat Vanessa, crying, her mascara running down her face. Her brother Marcus, my brother-in-law, had relapsed again. The clinic wanted $40,000 up front for a 6-month intensive program. Vanessa did not have it. Preston, who she had just started dating back then, certainly did not have it. I did. I wrote that check without hesitation. I paid for Marcus to get clean, not because I liked him particularly, but because he was family. And when Vanessa asked how we would tell people, I told her to say she got a grant. I let her keep her pride. I let her play the role of the savior while I drove a truck with a broken heater for 2 more winters to make up the difference in my savings. And then there was Harvard. Maya thinks she got a full scholarship. That is the story she tells everyone, and she was brilliant. She deserved one. But in her sophomore year, her grades slipped just enough to disqualify her from the Dean List funding. She called me sobbing, saying she would have to drop out and transfer to a state school. I told her to wait a day. The next morning, the university bursar office called her to say an anonymous alumni donor had covered the tuition gap. $50,000 a year for 3 years. That donor was not an alumnus. It was a bricklayer named Luther Banks. I looked down at my hands resting on the table. They were rough-scarred from years of handling rebar and concrete. These hands had built the foundation of Maya life. I lived in a small one-bedroom apartment. I clipped coupons. I wore this same suit for a decade. Not because I had to, but because I chose to channel every spare dollar into ensuring my daughter and even my ungrateful ex-wife never felt the cold wind of poverty that I grew up with. And now here I was sitting by the bathroom door while Preston took the credit. Preston's voice boomed again, snapping me back to the present. "People told me I was crazy," he said, chuckling softly. "They said Preston spending $100,000 on a wedding is insane, but I told them you cannot put a price on love. Seeing Maya face today, that is worth every penny of that $100,000. Thunderous applause filled the room. Guests stood up raising their glasses. I saw Maya sitting at the head table, covering her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Preston with such pure, unadulterated worship that it felt like a physical blow to my gut. She believed him. She truly believed that this man who had been in her life for a fraction of the time I had was her knight in shining armor. $100,000. The number echoed in my head. It was a specific number, too specific. My blood ran cold. Last Tuesday, just a week ago, I had visited the bank. I knew weddings were expensive. I knew the $50,000 deposit I had paid directly to the venue was just the start. So I had transferred another $100,000 to a joint account I had set up for Maya years ago, an account she had access to but rarely used. I told her in a text message that it was an early wedding gift just in case she needed extra for the honeymoon or a house down payment. She had replied with a simple heart emoji. I assumed she had seen it. I assumed she knew the money was there. But if Preston was claiming he spent $100,000, I pulled my phone out of my pocket. My thumb hovered over the screen. I needed to know. I could not rely on assumptions anymore. Assumptions had gotten me a seat at table 25. I opened the secure messaging app I used to communicate with my financial manager, David. David was a sharp kid, loyal to a fault, the only person besides me who knew exactly how much the bank's estate was actually worth. David. I typed, my fingers moving quickly. I need a trace on that transfer I authorized last Tuesday. The $100,000 to the joint account ending in 4598. Where did it go? I hit send. On stage, Preston was wiping a fake tear from his eye. "I love you, Maya," he said, his voice cracking theatrically. "You are the daughter I never had." I watched Maya stand up and rush into his arms. The room went wild. The photographer flashed away, capturing the moment of the perfect family. The loving stepfather. The grateful daughter. And in the background, blurred and out of focus, the empty chair where her real father should have been. My phone vibrated in my hand. I looked down. David was fast. He was always fast. "Boss, I am looking at the transaction history now," he wrote. The money hit the joint account on Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. I waited. The 3 dots appeared, indicating he was still typing. At 10:30 a.m. on the same day, the entire amount was transferred out. David continued. Transferred where I typed back. Did it go to the wedding planner? Did it go to the catering company? I looked up at Preston. He was hugging Connor, now clapping him on the back like an old buddy. He looked so confident, so secure. My phone buzzed again, a long vibration this time. No, boss. David replied. It did not go to any vendor. It was a wire transfer to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The beneficiary is listed as Golden Sands Holdings. Golden Sands. I knew that name. It was not a bank. It was not an investment firm. It was a casino, a notorious high-stakes gambling syndicate that operated out of the Caribbean, the kind of place that broke thumbs when you did not pay up. I stared at the screen, the blue light illuminating the fury in my eyes. Preston had not spent a dime on this wedding. He had taken my money, the money I slaved for, the money I gave to my daughter for her future, and he had wired it straight to a casino to cover his losses. He was standing there receiving a standing ovation for spending my money to pay his debts. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive in its absolute moral bankruptcy. He had stolen from me twice. First, he stole the credit for raising my daughter, and now he had literally stolen her inheritance to save his own skin. I looked at Maya again. She was wiping her eyes, laughing at something Preston was saying. She had no idea. She thought she was rich. She thought she was safe. She did not know that her husband-to-be was marrying into a hollow shell, that her stepfather was a thief, and that the only financial safety net she had was sitting at table 25 eating cold chicken. I felt a calm descend over me. It was the calm of a man who finally has all the pieces of the puzzle. The picture was ugly, but it was complete. I typed one last message to David: get me the full statement, and get me the foreclosure notice on Preston apartment. I want everything ready to display in 5 minutes. Copy that, boss, David replied. Give them hell. I put the phone away. I picked up my glass of water and took a long, slow sip. Preston was wrapping up his speech. So, let us eat, let us drink, and let us celebrate love, he shouted, raising his glass high. I raised my glass too from the shadows. Yes, Preston, I whispered. Let us celebrate. Because the hangover you are going to have in about 10 minutes is going to last for the rest of your miserable life. I watched him step down from the stage, shaking hands, basking in the glory. He was walking toward the head table, toward the seat of honor. I pushed my chair back. The metal legs scraped against the floor, a harsh sound that nobody heard over the applause. It was time. The investigation was over. The verdict was in. And now I was going to deliver the sentence. The applause died down, but the hum of self-congratulation lingered in the air like cigar smoke. I watched Preston navigate the room, shaking hands and accepting praises for a generosity that did not exist. He looked like a politician on election night, confident that the votes were already rigged in his favor. I sat back in my metal chair at table 25, the darkness of the corner wrapping around me like a familiar old blanket. My phone was still warm in my hand, the evidence of his theft glowing on the screen, but I slipped it back into my pocket. Patience, Luther, I told myself. You do not pour the concrete until the rebar is tied. You wait until the structure is ready to hold the weight. I picked up my glass of water and swirled it, watching the ice cubes clash. I was alone again, but not for long. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement near the head table. It was frantic, nervous movement that stood out against the slow, relaxed pace of the dinner service. It was Connor. My son-in-law looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on a trap door. He was pale, his face glistening with a sheen of sweat that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. He kept glancing over his shoulder, looking at Maya, who was busy posing for selfies with her bridesmaids. When he was sure she was distracted, he slipped away from the head table, moving quickly through the shadows, skirting the edge of the room to avoid detection. He was heading straight for me. I did not wave. I did not smile. I just watched him come. I had always liked Connor. He was a soft-spoken boy, a computer engineer who treated my daughter like she was made of porcelain. But he was weak. He let Maya steamroll over him, let her dictate their life, their friends, and now their wedding. He had swallowed the lie that Preston was the patriarch because it was easier than fighting for the truth. Connor reached my table and practically collapsed into the empty chair next to me. He looked terrified. He pulled at his collar as if it were choking him. Luther, he whispered, his voice trembling. Can I sit here for a second? Maya thinks I went to the bathroom. I nodded, slowly, pushing the untouched basket of cold rolls toward him. Sit, son. You look like you need a drink more than a roll, though. Connor ignored the food. He leaned across the table, his eyes darting around the room, scanning for spies. Luther, something is wrong, seriously wrong. I kept my face impassive. What makes you say that? Connor, is the champagne not cold enough? Is the caviar not salty enough? Connor shook his head, frustration creeping into his voice. No, stop it, please. I am serious. I just walked past the kitchen service entrance to get some fresh air. The florist was arguing with the bandleader. And then I heard the head caterer on the phone yelling at someone. I raised an eyebrow. Weddings are stressful, Connor. People yell. Not like this, Luther. They were whispering about payments. The florist said her check bounced 3 days ago. She said she only delivered the flowers today because Preston promised cash on delivery. But when she asked him for it 10 minutes ago, he laughed and told her to enjoy a drink and wait until the end of the night. I took a sip of water, hiding the grim satisfaction that was curling the corners of my mouth. The cracks were showing. The facade was peeling away faster than I expected. And that is not all. Connor continued, his voice dropping even lower. The band, they stopped playing early. Did you notice? They are on break now, but the lead singer told me they are not plugging the amps back in until they see a credit confirmation. Luther Preston told us everything was paid for months ago. He showed us a spreadsheet. He said he took care of it all so we wouldn't have to worry. I looked at the boy. He was genuinely confused. He was trying to reconcile the image of the wealthy, benevolent stepfather with the reality of bounced checks and angry vendors. It was a math problem that did not add up, and for an engineer like Connor, that was torture. Spreadsheets are easy to make, Connor, I said softly. You can type any number you want into a computer. It does not make the money real. Connor looked at me, and for the first time tonight, he really saw me. He did not see the outdated construction worker. He saw the man who had built a business from the ground up, who knew the difference between a blueprint and a building. Do you know something? He asked. His eyes were pleading. Please, Luther. If you know something, tell me. I feel like I'm going crazy. Everyone is clapping for him, but the staff looks like they are about to riot. I looked at Maya across the room. She was laughing, oblivious to the storm gathering over her head. She was a victim of her own vanity, yes, but she was also a victim of a master manipulator. And Connor, he was just collateral damage. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone again. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. Once I showed him this, there was no going back. The illusion would be shattered forever. I unlocked the screen and opened the email from David. I pushed the phone across the table toward Connor. Read the highlighted line, I said. Connor looked down. He squinted at the small screen, reading the text. Wire transfer. $100,000. From Luther Banks to joint account 4598. Date Tuesday, October 12th. He looked up at me, confused. You sent us $100,000. But we never saw that. The account balance is... Keep reading, I interrupted, pointing at the screen. Look at the next line. Same day. 90 minutes later. Connor looked back down. His eyes widened. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Transfer out. $100,000. Beneficiary Golden Sands Holdings. Location Cayman Islands. Connor stared at the words as if they were written in an alien language. Golden Sands, he whispered. What is that? Is that an investment firm? I leaned forward, my voice low and hard. No, son. It is a casino. A black market gambling syndicate. Connor's face went gray. He looked like he was going to be sick. He pushed the phone away as if it burned him. He stole it, Connor stammered. He stole your money. The money you gave us. And he gambled it away. He did not just gamble it away, Connor, I said. He used it to pay off old debts so they wouldn't break his legs before the wedding. And that is not the worst part. He stood on that stage 5 minutes ago and claimed he spent that money on this party. He claimed my sacrifice was his generosity. Connor put his head in his hands. He was shaking. Oh my God. Oh my God. I shook his hand. I hugged him. I thanked him for giving Maya her dream wedding. And he stole from you. He stole from us. He looked up at me, tears forming in his eyes. Why didn't you say anything, Luther? Why are you sitting back here in the dark letting him humiliate you? Because if I had told you yesterday, would you have believed me? I asked. Would Maya have believed me? Or would she have said the jealous old man is trying to ruin her happiness again? Connor fell silent. He knew the answer. Maya was so deep under Preston's spell she would have called the police on me if I tried to warn her. But now Connor whispered, now we know. We have to tell her. We have to stop this. We will, I said, but not yet. We need the final nail in the coffin. Just then, the swinging door to the kitchen flew open with a bang. A man in a sharp black suit stepped out. He looked stressed, his tie slightly askew. His forehead creased with worry. He scanned the room, his eyes bypassing the head table entirely and landing straight on table 25. It was Antonio, the general manager of the Grand Plaza. I had known Antonio for 20 years. I had renovated his first restaurant when he was just starting out and couldn't afford to pay full price. I had done the work at cost because I saw his potential. We had respected each other ever since. Antonio hurried over to my table. He ignored Connor completely. He leaned down close to my ear, his voice urgent but hushed. Mr. Banks, he said, using the title nobody else in this room seemed to think I deserved. We have a code red situation. What is it, Tony? I asked, keeping my voice calm. The card, Antonio said, wiping sweat from his brow. We just tried to run the final authorization for the main course service. The fillets, the lobster, the wine service for the toast. It is a $20,000 charge. And I prompted. Declined, Antonio said. We ran it 3 times. Insufficient funds. We called the bank and they said the card has been reported for suspicious activity and is locked down. Connor gasped next to me. Antonio glanced at Connor, then back to me. Boss, my chef is holding the plates. The staff is ready to walk. You know the policy. No pay, no play. Especially with a bill this size. I cannot serve 300 steaks on a promise. I looked at the head table. Preston was laughing, holding a glass of wine that he hadn't paid for. He had no idea the guillotine was about to drop. So what is the plan, Tony? I asked. I am going to have to cut the lights, Antonio said, looking pained. I am going to have to go up to that microphone and announce that the reception is over unless payment is rendered immediately. It is going to be ugly, Mr. Banks. It is going to be a disaster. The police will probably be involved. Connor grabbed my arm. Luther, you can't let that happen. Maya, she will die of shame. If the lights go out, if they announce he is broke in front of everyone. I looked at Connor. He was right. It would destroy Maya, but maybe she needed to be destroyed to be rebuilt. However, I looked at Antonio. He was a good man doing his job. He didn't deserve to be stiffed. And the staff, the waiters, the cooks, the cleaners, they were working people like me. They needed their paychecks. Preston wasn't just screwing me, he was screwing them too. Wait, Tony, I said. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket, past the phone, past the voice recorder. I pulled out a slim black wallet. Connor watched me mesmerized. I opened the wallet and pulled out a single card. It was black, made of anodized titanium. It was heavy. The Centurion card from American Express. Invitation only. No limit. I held it out to Antonio. Run it, I said. Antonio's eyes widened. He looked at the card, then at me. Mr. Banks, this is... Are you sure? This is another 30 grand on top of the deposit? I am sure, I said, my voice hard as steel. Put the whole thing on my tab. The steak, the lobster, the wine, everything. But Boss Antonio stammered. Why, that guy... He is treating you like dirt. Why would you save him? I am not saving him, Tony, I said. I am buying the stage. I looked at Connor, who was staring at the black card with his mouth open. You asked who is paying for this party, Connor, I said. Look at me. I turned to Antonio. Keep the service going, Tony. Feed them. Get them drunk. Let Preston think he got away with it. But in exchange, I want one thing. Anything, Mr. Banks, Antonio said, taking the card with both hands like it was a holy relic. In 15 minutes, when the speeches resume, I want you to cut Preston Mike, I said. And I want you to give the floor to me. And I want you to make sure the projector screen is lowered and connected to my phone. Antonio grinned, a slow, knowing grin. He understood. He knew I wasn't just paying for dinner. I was paying for an execution. You got it, boss, he said. Consider it done. He turned and walked back into the kitchen, barking orders at the staff to move, move, move. I turned back to Connor. He looked at me with a mixture of awe and fear. You are rich, he whispered. Like, really rich. That card, I have only seen those in movies. Rich is a state of mind, Connor, I said, tucking my wallet back into my pocket. Money is just a tool, and tonight I am using this tool to dismantle a lie. I leaned closer to him. Now listen to me. Go back to your seat. Don't say a word to Maya. Don't say a word to Preston. Act like everything is normal. Let them eat. Let them think they won. But what are you going to do? Connor asked. I picked up my fork and took a bite of the cold chicken. It tasted like victory. I am going to give a speech, son, I said. And believe me, it is going to be a speech nobody in this family will ever forget. Go. Connor stood up. He looked at me for one last second, then nodded. He turned and walked back toward the light, back toward the head table. But he walked differently this time. He walked like a man who knew where the real power in the room was sitting. I sat back and watched. The waiters streamed out of the kitchen trays high-loaded with steaming filet mignon. The music started up again. Preston clapped his hands, delighted, thinking his charm had worked, thinking the delay was just a hiccup. Eat up, Preston, I whispered to the darkness. Enjoy your last supper, because the bill is coming due, and I am the one collecting. The titanium card felt heavy in my hand, warmer than the cold metal of the table. It was a Centurion card, the kind they do not advertise, the kind you cannot apply for. You have to be invited. and you only get invited if you have moved mountains of money and built empires of concrete. To Antonio standing nervously beside me, it was a lifeline. To me, it was a detonator. I looked at the small black rectangle, and then I looked out at the room. Preston was laughing at the head table, clinking his glass against a spoon to signal another round of self-serving toasts. Maya was beaming, her hand resting on his arm, her eyes shining with a pride that was entirely misplaced. If I put this card back in my wallet, the music would stop. The lights would go up. The police would arrive. The illusion would shatter right now in a messy, chaotic heap of unpaid bills and humiliation. Maya would be devastated, yes, but she would also be the victim. She would be the poor bride whose stepfather made a mistake. She would cry, and people would pity her. That was not enough. Pity does not teach lessons. Pity does not burn away the rot so you can build on fresh soil. If I paid the bill, I would be buying another hour of this charade. I would be funding the very lie that was choking me. But I would also be buying something else. I would be buying silence. I would be buying control. And most importantly, I would be buying the microphone. I looked up at Antonio. His face was pale, his eyes darting between my hand and the kitchen door where his staff was waiting for the signal to either serve the lobster or walk out. "Do it," I said, my voice low and gravelly. I handed him the card. Antonio took it with both hands as if it were a fragile bird. "Are you sure, Mr. Banks? This is a lot of money. The whole reception, the open bar, the service charge. It is going to be over $30,000. I did not blink. "Run it, Tony. But listen to me carefully. This is not a gift. This is a transaction." I leaned forward, the metal legs of my chair groaning against the floor. Nobody knows this card came from me. As far as Preston knows, his credit finally cleared. As far as Maya knows, her rich daddy saved the day again. You keep the champagne flowing. You serve the steak. You let them eat until they are full and happy and arrogant. Antonio nodded, sweating. "Understood, boss. Silent partner. Just like the old days." "Not just like the old days," I corrected him. "Because in 15 minutes, when the main course is cleared, I want you to do something for me. I want you to cut the feed to Preston microphone. I want you to lower the main projection screen. And I want you to hand me the mic." Antonio's eyes widened. He looked at the card, then at the head table, then back at me. A slow realization spread across his face. He knew me. He knew I was a fair man, but he also knew I was a man who measured twice and cut once. He realized I was not paying for a party. I was renting a courtroom. "You are going to take him down, aren't you?" Tony whispered. "I am going to tell the truth, Tony," I said. "Whatever happens after that is up to them." Antonio slipped the card into his pocket. "Done. The floor is yours, Mr. Banks. I will signal the DJ to prep the audio hookup for your phone." He turned and hurried toward the kitchen. A moment later, I saw the servers flood out through the swinging doors, balancing massive trays of steaming lobster and filet mignon. The room cheered. Preston raised his hands in victory, clearly thinking his stalled payment had finally gone through or that the hotel had just caved to his intimidation. He looked smug. He looked untouchable. I sat back and watched them eat. I watched my daughter cut into a steak that cost more than the weekly grocery budget of the family living in my first rental property. I watched her laugh and feed a piece to Preston. It was a grotesque pantomime of a happy family funded by the man they had banished to the corner by the toilets. I checked my phone. David had sent the files, the bank statements, the foreclosure notice, the criminal record from Florida. It was all queued up, ready to be cast to the big screen at the touch of a button. I took a sip of water. My throat felt dry. It is a strange feeling knowing you are about to destroy your own child's happiness. But I reminded myself that this wasn't happiness. It was a narcotic. She was high on a lie, and she needed to crash before she could ever learn to walk on solid ground again. Suddenly, I felt a presence. The air shifted. I looked up. Maya was standing there. She had come from the head table, moving quickly through the room, her white dress swishing angrily around her legs. She did not look happy. Her face was flushed, and her lips were pressed into a thin line of irritation. She had seen me talking to Antonio. She stopped at my table, her hands on her hips, blocking my view of the room. "What were you doing?" she demanded, her voice a sharp hiss that cut through the ambient noise. I looked at her calmly. "Hello, Maya. Are you enjoying your steak?" "Don't play dumb with me, Dad," she snapped. "I saw you talking to the manager. I saw you stop him. What were you doing? Were you complaining about the food? Were you asking for a doggy bag to take home? The accusation hit me like a slap. Doggy bag. She thought I was begging for scraps. She thought her father, the man who had worked 16-hour days so she could have piano lessons, was trying to scrounge for free food. I slowly placed my hands on the table. No, Maya. I was not asking for a doggy bag. Then what? She interrupted, her voice rising. Why were you bothering him? Antonio is a busy man. He is catering to high-end clients tonight, Dad. He does not have time to deal with complaints from the cheap seats. God, it is so embarrassing. I told Preston we should have just sent you a check and let you stay home, but he insisted on inviting you out of pity. Pity. There was that word again. Maya. I said, my voice steady. I was just having a conversation with an old friend. Antonio and I go way back. Maya rolled her eyes. Oh, please. Don't tell me you fixed his sink 20 years ago or something. Dad, nobody cares about your handyman stories here. This is a black tie event. These are important people. Preston is trying to close a deal with the man at table 4. The last thing he needs is his father-in-law pestering the staff like some senile old vagrant. She looked down at my suit. She looked at the table by the bathroom. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated shame. Just eat your chicken and stay quiet, she said. Please. For once in your life, just have some dignity. Stop trying to insert yourself where you don't belong. You are ruining the aesthetic, Dad. You are a stain on this perfect night. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. I saw the fear behind the anger. She was terrified. She was terrified that she wasn't good enough, that this world she had married into would reject her if they knew where she really came from. She was trying to kill her past to save her future. But she didn't understand that a tree without roots is just dead wood waiting to fall. Dignity, I repeated softly. You want me to have dignity? Yes, she hissed. Just sit there. Be invisible. And as soon as the cake is cut, you can leave. I will call you an Uber. Do not come say goodbye to the head table. Just go. She turned to leave, confident that she had put me in my place. Confident that the old bricklayer had been sufficiently cowed by the queen. Maya, I called out. She stopped and turned back, her expression impatient. What now? I stood up. I didn't slouch. I didn't lean on the table. I stood up to my full height of 6'2", the height that had allowed me to carry beams and hoist frames when I was younger. I looked her dead in the eye. You are right, I said. I have been outdated. I have been quiet. But tonight is a special night. A wedding is about truth, Maya. It is about vows. For better or for worse. For richer or for poorer. She looked confused, her brow furrowing. What are you talking about? You are rambling. I am saying that I took your advice, I said. I decided not to just sit here. I decided to give you a gift. Maya scoffed. A gift, Dad, we already talked about this. I don't want your handmade picture frames or whatever junk you brought. Preston gave me diamonds. I smiled. It was the smile of a man holding a royal flush while his opponent went all in on a pair of 2s. This isn't a picture frame, Maya, and it certainly isn't junk. It is something much more expensive. It is a memory. She stared at me, unsettled by the shift in my tone. You are weirding me out. Just stay here. Don't you dare move. She spun around and marched back toward the head table, back to the safety of her husband and his lies. I watched her go. I watched her sit down next to Preston and whisper something in his ear, probably complaining about how annoying I was. Preston laughed and kissed her hand. I sat back down. Antonio walked out of the kitchen and caught my eye. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. The payment had cleared. The system was ready. I picked up my phone. I opened the connection to the AV system. 15 minutes. I looked at the half-eaten roll on my plate. I wasn't hungry for food anymore. I was hungry for justice. Maya thought I was begging for leftovers. She didn't know I had just bought the restaurant. She told me to keep my dignity. Well, I was about to show her what dignity looked like. Dignity isn't hiding in the corner. Dignity is standing up when everyone expects you to kneel. The music swelled. The waiters cleared the plates. The room buzzed with the happy ignorance of the fed and the deceived. I adjusted my tie. I smoothed the lapels of my outdated wool suit. Get ready, Maya, I whispered. Daddy is about to make a toast. The lobster tails were being cleared, and the heavy scent of melted butter and expensive cologne hung in the air like a thick fog. I sat there watching the waiters move in their synchronized dance, my hand resting on the phone that was now linked to the main projection system. The countdown in my head was ticking away. 10 minutes. 10 minutes until I stood up. 10 minutes until the truth came crashing down on this masquerade ball. I was calm. It was the eerie calm of a demolition expert who has already set the charges and is just waiting to press the button. But chaos rarely waits for a schedule. I felt a hand grip my arm. It was not a gentle touch. It was sharp nails digging into the fabric of my old wool suit, clawing through to the skin. I didn't have to look up to know who it was. I could smell the gin and the desperate ambition radiating off her. "Get up!" Vanessa hissed, her voice low and dangerous, close to my ear. "Get up right now, Luther. We need to talk." I turned slowly. My ex-wife's face was a mask of panic, barely held together by layers of expensive foundation. Her eyes were darting around the room, checking to see if anyone was watching us. She was terrified, not of me, but of the scene she sensed was coming. "I am comfortable right here." "Vanessa," I said, peeling her fingers off my arm, "I have a front row seat to the show." She didn't let go. She dug her nails in harder, pulling me with a strength I didn't know she possessed. "Don't you dare play games with me. Get up, now, over there in the service corridor." I looked at her desperate face. I realized she wasn't going to stop. If I stayed, she would cause a scene right here. And while I wanted a scene, I wanted it on my terms, not hers. I stood up, smoothing my jacket. "Fine," I said. "Lead the way." She marched me toward a narrow hallway near the kitchen entrance, away from the prying eyes of the guests. It was a service area lined with stacks of extra chairs and dirty linen carts. The glamour of the ballroom faded instantly, replaced by the harsh fluorescent lights and the smell of stale coffee. Vanessa spun around to face me. Her chest was heaving. "What did you do?" she demanded. I leaned against a stack of chairs, crossing my arms. "I assume you are referring to the bill." "Don't play coy with me, Luther," she snapped. Antonio told the head waiter to hold the service. Then suddenly, everything is fine. The champagne is flowing, the lobster is served. And I saw you hand him a card. I saw it, Luther. Since when do you have a credit card that actually works for a bill this size? I looked at her. For 20 years she had looked at me and seen only what she wanted to see. A failure, a laborer, a stepping stone she had discarded. "I have had a good year, Vanessa," I said vaguely. "Maybe the brick business isn't as dead as you think." She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "A good year. You live in a dump, Luther. You drive a truck that belongs in a junkyard. Don't lie to me. You probably took out a predatory loan or maxed out some emergency card just to show off, just to make Preston look bad." I shook my head, amazed by her blindness. "You think I paid $30,000 just to make Preston look bad?" "Vanessa, Preston does a fine job of making himself look bad all on his own." Her face tightened. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I know," I said, dropping my voice to a whisper. I stepped closer to her, invading her personal space. "I know about the debt. I know about the gambling. I know he stole the wedding money I sent Maya and wired it to the Cayman Islands. I expected her to gasp. I expected her to deny it. I expected her to defend him. But she didn't." Vanessa's expression didn't change. She didn't look shocked. She looked annoyed. She looked tired. "I know," she said. The words hung in the narrow hallway between us, sucking the air out of the room. I stared at her, stunned. "You know," I repeated. "You know he is a fraud. You know he stole from your daughter." Vanessa let out a long, exasperated sigh. She reached into her purse and pulled out a slim cigarette, holding it unlit in her trembling fingers. "Of course I know, Luther. I am not stupid. I know he has cash flow problems. I know he likes the tables a little too much." "So what?" "So what?" I felt my temper rising hot and fast. "Vanessa, he is a criminal. He is bankrupt. He is dragging Maya into a pit of debt and lies. He is a businessman," Vanessa shot back, her eyes flashing. "Businessmen have ups and downs. Yes, he is down right now. That is why we need this wedding. That is why we need the connections in that room. Do you have any idea who is sitting at table 4? That is the vice president of First National Bank. If Preston plays this right, if he looks the part of the successful patriarch, he closes a deal tonight that clears everything." I looked at her in horror. She was complicit. She wasn't a victim being duped. She was a partner in the con. She was willing to gamble Maya's future on the hope that Preston could scam one more investor. "You are selling your daughter?" I said, my voice thick with disgust. "You are selling her to save your own image. You need to be the wife of a rich man so badly that you don't care if the money is real or stolen." Vanessa stepped forward, poking a manicured finger into my chest. "Grow up, Luther. This is the real world. Image is currency. Yes, Preston is in a hole. But he has class. He has status. He can get us into clubs you couldn't even scrub the floors of. What do you have? Honesty. Hard work. Where did that get you? You are alone, Luther. You are 70 years old and you are alone in a cheap apartment. I chose a life of excitement, and I am not going to let you ruin it just because you are jealous." Jealous. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I am not jealous, Vanessa. I am horrified." "Listen to me," she hissed, stepping so close I could see the cracks in her makeup. "You are going to go back out there. You are going to sit down. You are going to shut up. And when the speeches start, you are going to clap like a good little ex-husband. And if I don't, I asked." She smiled. It was a cruel, serpentine smile. "If you say one word to expose Preston, if you ruin this deal for him, I swear to God, Luther, I will make sure you never see your grandchild." The world stopped. My grandchild. "Maya is pregnant," she whispered triumphantly, seeing the look on my face. "She just found out. She hasn't announced it yet. She was going to tell us tonight after the cake cutting." I felt the blood drain from my face. A baby. My Maya was having a baby. A little life that was innocent in all of this. "If you blow this up," Vanessa continued, pressing her advantage, "you destroy Maya's life. She will hate you. She will never let you near that baby. You will die an old, lonely man who never got to hold his grandbaby. Is your pride worth that? Luther, is your little crusade for truth worth dying alone?" I looked at her. I looked at the woman I had once loved. The woman I had worked 2 jobs for. And suddenly the memory washed over me. It was 20 years ago. I was 50. I had just started my company and cash was tight. I wanted to know if Vanessa was with me, or for the potential success. So I staged an accident. I had a friend call her and say I had fallen off a scaffold. I lay in a hospital bed, a fake cast on my leg, and told her I might never walk again. I told her the medical bills would bankrupt us. I told her we would have to move into a trailer. I remember the sound of her heels clicking on the hospital linoleum. She didn't cry. She didn't hold my hand. She looked at my leg, then at her watch. "I can't do this, Luther," she had said. "I didn't sign up to be a nurse for a cripple. I have a life to live." She walked out. She left me there thinking I was broken and destitute. She filed for divorce 3 days later. That was the day I knew. That was the day I locked my heart away and focused on building my empire alone. I looked at Vanessa now standing in the hallway using an unborn child as a bargaining chip. She hadn't changed. She was the same cold, calculating woman who had walked out of that hospital room. I started to laugh. It started as a chuckle deep in my chest and grew into a full, loud laugh that echoed off the concrete walls of the service corridor. Vanessa looked at me confused. "What is so funny? Stop laughing. You are crazy." I stopped laughing and looked her dead in the eye. The warmth was gone from my face. "You think I am the same Luther you left in that hospital bed, don't you?" I asked softly. "You think I am weak. You think I am afraid of being alone." I took a step toward her, and for the first time she looked genuinely scared. "I have been alone for 20 years, Vanessa. I made friends with the silence. I built a fortune in the silence. You think threatening me with loneliness works on a man who found peace in solitude? You are wrong." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It buzzed just as I grabbed it. A new email notification. And as for Maya, I continued, "I love her. I love her enough to save her, even if she hates me for it. I would rather she hate me and be safe than love me and be destitute. I would rather my grandchild grow up in a modest home with dignity than in a mansion built on fraud." I looked at the screen. It was the final piece of the puzzle, the email from my private investigator. Subject: federal indictment. I opened it. My eyes scanned the legal document. Preston Sterling, 3 previous bankruptcies under aliases. And there it was in black and white. An active FBI investigation for a Ponzi scheme involving $3 million of investor money. The warrant was being prepared. It was a matter of days, maybe hours. I turned the screen toward Vanessa. "Look at this," I said. She glanced at the phone. "What is it?" "It is not just debt, Vanessa. It is prison. Your husband isn't just a bad businessman. He is a target. The FBI is looking at him. If he takes money from that banker at table 4 tonight, he is committing federal wire fraud, and if you know about it and help him, you are an accomplice." Vanessa's face went white. The cigarette fell from her fingers. "FBI," she whispered. "You want to talk about the future?" I said, putting the phone away. "Here is the future. Preston is going to jail. The only question is whether you go down with him, and whether Maya goes down with him." I adjusted my tie. "I am going out there, Vanessa. I am going to take the microphone, and I am going to save my daughter from being an accessory to a crime. You can stand here and smoke, or you can come out and watch, but do not ever threaten me with my family again." I turned my back on her. I didn't wait for a response. I walked back down the hallway, leaving her standing there in the harsh fluorescent light, a woman who had traded everything for an image, only to find out the mirror was broken. I pushed open the doors to the ballroom. The music hit me. The laughter hit me. I walked straight to table 25. Antonio was waiting by the sound booth. He saw me coming. He saw the look on my face. He didn't need a signal. He knew. It was time to stop the music. The DJ faded the music out slowly, replacing the upbeat pop song with a soft, ambient instrumental that signaled the time for speeches had arrived. The transition was smooth, professional, and entirely paid for by me. I sat at table 25 watching the room settle into an expectant silence. Waiters stopped clearing plates and stepped back into the shadows. Guests shifted in their chairs, turning their bodies toward the stage, their faces flushed with wine and anticipation. They were ready for the performance. They were ready to hear the wealthy stepfather talk about how much he loved his new daughter. They were ready to applaud the man who had bought their dinner. Preston stood up from the head table. He adjusted his silk bow tie and shot his cuffs, revealing a gold watch that I knew for a fact was a high-quality replica. He looked every inch the tycoon. He smiled at Maya, a confident, reassuring smile that said, "Do not worry, darling, I have got this." He walked toward the microphone stand in the center of the dance floor, his stride long and purposeful. He tapped the microphone twice. Thump, thump. The sound echoed through the ballroom, commanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," Preston began, his voice booming with practiced charisma. "If I could have your attention for just a moment. As the father of the bride, I would like to say a few words about—" Suddenly, the sound cut out. It was not a fade. It was a hard cut. 1 second his voice was filling the room, and the next there was only the dead air of a disconnected feed. Preston frowned, tapping the microphone again. Nothing. He looked over at the DJ booth, his expression shifting from charm to irritation. He gestured with his hand, a sharp, angry motion that meant, "Fix it now." But the DJ did not look at him. The DJ was looking at Antonio, the general manager, who was walking onto the dance floor with a wireless microphone in his hand. Antonio moved with a grave solemnity. He did not look at Preston. He walked past him as if he were a piece of furniture. Preston reached out to grab Antonio's arm, confusion turning to anger. "Excuse me," Preston snapped, his voice loud enough to be heard in the front rows even without amplification. "What do you think you are doing? We are in the middle of a toast." Antonio stopped. He turned to Preston, and though his voice was polite, his eyes were cold. "There has been a change in the program, Mr. Sterling," Antonio said smoothly, raising his own microphone, which was working perfectly. "We have a special request for the first speech of the night." Preston laughed, a nervous, incredulous sound. "A request I am paying for this event. I did not approve any request. Give me that microphone." He reached for it, but Antonio took a step back. "Actually," Antonio said, his voice projecting to the entire room, "the bill has been settled by a different party, and that party has the floor." A ripple of whispers went through the room. Guests looked at each other, confused. Maya stood up at the head table, her face pale. She looked from Preston to Antonio, then her eyes darted frantically around the room until they landed on the darkness of table 25. Antonio turned to the crowd, ignoring Preston's sputtering rage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the man who made this evening possible, the father of the bride, Mr. Luther Banks." The spotlight, which had been focused on Preston, swung violently across the room. It swept over the tables of the wealthy investors. It swept over the cake. It swept over the dance floor. And it came to rest in the far back corner, illuminating the area by the kitchen door and the restrooms. It landed on me. For a moment there was absolute silence, the kind of silence that is heavy and awkward. The guests twisted in their seats, craning their necks to see who was sitting in the servant section. They saw an old black man in a gray wool suit sitting alone at a metal table. They saw the scuffed hands. They saw the tired face. Maya gasped. I saw her mouth the words, "No, no, no." She started making cutting motions across her throat, signaling Antonio to stop. She looked at Preston, her eyes begging him to do something. Preston stared at me across the room. The initial shock on his face melted away, replaced by a sneer of pure contempt. He leaned into the dead microphone on the stand, then realized it was off and just shouted instead, "Is this a joke? He is senile. Let the old man sleep." Then he looked at Maya and I saw him shrug. He whispered something to her. I could read his lips. Let him speak. He will look like a clown. It will be funny. Preston stepped back, crossing his arms, a smirk playing on his lips. He thought I was going to ramble. He thought I was going to slur my words or cry about being left out. He thought he was about to witness a comedy sketch that would only highlight his own superiority. I stood up. My chair did not scrape this time. I lifted it slightly as I rose. I buttoned my jacket. I did not look at the guests. I did not look at the waiters. I kept my eyes locked on the stage. I began to walk. It was a long walk from table 25. The spotlight followed me, creating a tunnel of light in the darkness. I could hear the murmurs as I passed the tables. "Is that really her father?" someone whispered. "He looks like a janitor," another voice said. "Why was he sitting by the bathroom?" I ignored them all. I walked with a steady rhythm, heel-toe, heel-toe. The same rhythm I used when I walked steel beams 50 stories in the air. I did not rush. I did not bow my head. I carried the weight of my 70 years like a badge of honor, not a burden. As I approached the stage, the whispers died down. There was something in my posture, something in the way I held myself that silenced the mockery. I was not walking like a victim. I was walking like a man coming to collect a debt. I reached the dance floor. Preston was still smirking, but as I got closer, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He stepped aside, making a mocking, sweeping gesture with his arm, inviting me to the center. "All yours, Pops," he muttered as I passed him. "Try not to drool on the mic." I ignored him. I took the microphone from Antonio. It felt heavy and cool in my hand. A tool. Just like a hammer. Just like a trowel. I turned to face the room. 300 faces stared back at me. Some were amused. Some were pitying. Most were just waiting for the train wreck. I looked at Maya. She was sitting down again, shrinking into her chair, wishing the floor would swallow her whole. She refused to meet my eyes. I took a deep breath. I did not clear my throat. I did not tap the mic. I just spoke. 30 years ago, I began my voice deep and resonant, filling the cavernous room without a tremor. 30 years ago, on a Tuesday night, much like this one, I was standing in a hospital hallway in Chicago. I was wearing work boots covered in dry cement. I had dust in my hair. I had been pouring a foundation for a parking garage for 12 hours straight. I paused, allowing the image to settle. The room was quiet. The nurses tried to stop me from going into the delivery room. They said I was too dirty. They said I needed to scrub up. But I heard a cry. A small, terrified cry. And I pushed past them. I pushed past the doctors. I pushed past my own exhaustion. Because I knew that cry. It was the sound of my life beginning. I looked directly at Maya. She looked up slowly, her eyes wet. "When they put you in my arms, Maya, you were so small. You fit right here in the crook of my elbow. Your skin was soft. My hands, these hands." I held up my right hand palm open, showing the calluses, the scars, the rough texture of a lifetime of labor. My hands were like sandpaper. I was terrified I would scratch you. I was terrified I would drop you. I was just a bricklayer. I didn't know how to be a father. I didn't know how to be gentle. I lowered my hand, but I made a promise to you that night. I looked at your little face and I swore that these rough hands would build a world where your hands would never have to be rough. I swore that I would lay every brick mix, every bag of mortar, and carry every load so that you could walk on smooth ground. I took a step closer to the edge of the stage. The audience was leaning in. The mockery was gone. The pity was gone. They were listening. Because truth has a frequency that cuts through everything else. I didn't have an education, I continued. I didn't have a trust fund. I didn't have a family name that opened doors. All I had was my back and my word. When your mother left us, I heard a sharp intake of breath from Vanessa at table 1. I didn't look at her. When it was just the two of us in that cold apartment on 5th Street, I learned to braid hair. I learned to cook soup. I learned that a peanut butter sandwich tastes better when you cut it into the shape of a star. I worked double shifts. I missed sleep. I missed meals. I wore the same boots until the soles fell off and I duct taped them back together because you needed ballet slippers. I saw a woman at table 4 wipe a tear from her eye. Even the stiff men in suits were watching me intently, their drinks forgotten in their hands. I never complained, I said softly. I never asked for a thank you. Because watching you grow, watching you succeed, that was my payment. When you got into Harvard, I didn't tell you that I sold my truck to pay for your first semester. I walked to the job site for 6 months, 5 miles a day, in the rain, in the snow, and every step I took, I thought about you sitting in a library reading books I couldn't understand, and I smiled. I smiled because the foundation was holding. The house I was building for you was strong. I paused again, letting the silence stretch. Maya was crying now openly. Not the fake tears of a bride overcome with joy, but the ugly, messy tears of a child who remembers. But somewhere along the way, I said, my voice hardening just a fraction. Somewhere along the way, the dust on my clothes became a problem. The calluses on my hands became an embarrassment. You started to look at the house I built, and all you saw was the sweat. You didn't see the love. You wanted a different kind of house. A house made of gold. A house made of image. I turned slowly to look at Preston. He wasn't smirking anymore. He was frowning, his arms uncrossed, his body tense. You met a man who had clean hands, I said, gesturing to Preston. A man who wore suits that didn't smell like labor. A man who promised you that you were royalty. And I get it. Who wouldn't want to be royalty? It is seductive. It is shiny. It is easy. I looked back at the crowd. Tonight I was told that I was outdated. I was told that I didn't fit the picture. I was told to sit by the toilets because my presence was a stain on this perfect evening. And I did. I sat there. I ate the cold chicken. I drank the warm water. Because a father eats the scraps so his children can feast. That is what we do. But then I stopped. I let the word hang there. But then I realized something. There is a difference between a foundation made of concrete and a foundation made of cardboard. One holds up in a storm. The other dissolves when the rain comes. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I have spent my life ensuring your safety, Maya. I have protected you from hunger. I have protected you from cold. And tonight, as your father, I have one last duty. I have to protect you from a lie. I looked at Antonio in the DJ booth. He nodded. Preston took a step forward. What are you doing, Luther? Put that away. Sit down. You are drunk. I turned on him. The sadness in my eyes was gone, replaced by the cold steel of the foreman who just caught a thief on his job site. I am not drunk, Preston, I said, my voice booming without the need for a shout. And I am not outdated. I am the inspector, and I am here to condemn this building. I looked back at the crowd. You all see a wealthy businessman standing here. You see a generous stepfather who paid for this lavish wedding. You see a success story. I pressed the button on my phone. Behind me, the massive projection screen that had been displaying a slideshow of Maya and Preston happy photos flickered. The image changed. It wasn't a photo, it was a document, a bank statement. But what if I told you, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that echoed like thunder, that the only thing Preston Sterling has successfully built is a house of cards? The room gasped as the numbers on the screen came into focus. The sincerity of my opening speech had hooked them. They had opened their hearts to the poor bricklayer. And now that their hearts were open, I was about to pour the truth in and let it set hard. Look at the screen, I commanded. Let us see who really paid for the steak you just ate. The image of the bank statement hovered on the screen behind me, a ghostly indictment glowing in blue and white, but I did not let the audience dwell on the numbers just yet. I signaled to the technician in the booth, and the screen faded to black, plunging the room back into the soft, ambient lighting of the ballroom. The gasp that had rippled through the crowd was replaced by a confused, heavy silence. They had seen the theft, but they did not yet understand the betrayal. Money is just paper. It can be paid back. It can be earned again. But what Preston had stolen was something far more valuable and far harder to replace. I lowered the microphone slightly, looking down at the scuffed toes of my shoes, before raising my head to look directly at my daughter. Maya was freezing in her chair, her face a mask of porcelain terror. She looked like a statue of a bride, not a living, breathing woman. She was waiting for the ground to open up and swallow her. "They say a father is a daughter's first love," I said, my voice soft but carrying to every corner of the room. "They say he is her first hero, the man who sets the standard for how she should be treated." For 30 years I tried to be that standard. I was not a man of words. I was not a man of grand gestures or expensive vacations. I was a man of presence. I was there. I was the solid wall that kept the wind out. I was the roof that kept the rain off. I took a slow, deliberate step toward the edge of the stage, reducing the distance between me and the head table. But today I was given a new title. Today, right here on this dance floor, my own daughter looked me in the eye and told me I was outdated. She told me that my love was like an old coat that no longer fit the style of her new life. She told me that I was an embarrassment. I let the word hang there. Embarrassment. I saw Maya flinch as if I had thrown a stone at her. She gripped the tablecloth, her knuckles white. She chose a different man to dance with. I continued, my voice gaining strength. A modern man, a man who fits the image, a man who knows how to wear a tuxedo and how to charm a room full of strangers. And I admit, looking at the two of you spinning around under these lights, you looked perfect. You looked like a magazine cover. I turned my body, pivoting on my heel to face Preston directly. He was sitting rigidly, his jaw clenched, his eyes darting around the room, trying to gauge the temperature of the crowd. He looked like a cornered animal trying to decide whether to bite or run. "Mr. Sterling," I said, addressing him with a cold, formal politeness, "you are a magnificent dancer. Truly. You have a grace that I could never hope to replicate with these stiff knees and this bad back. You know how to lead. You know how to spin. You know how to put on a show." Preston sneered, trying to regain his composure. He opened his mouth to speak, to make some witty retort that would dismiss me, but I did not give him the chance. I raised my voice just a fraction, cutting him off before he could make a sound. "But dancing is easy, Preston. Dancing is just following steps. Being a father. That is about knowing the person you are holding." I walked down the steps of the stage, moving onto the floor. The guests at the nearby tables pulled their chairs back instinctively, clearing a path for me. I walked until I was standing 10 feet from the head table, looming over them like a judgment. "Tell me, Preston," I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You call Maya your daughter. You say you love her more than life itself. So tell me, does she still sleep with the hallway light on when it rains?" Preston blinked. Confusion washed over his face. "What?" "It is a simple question," I said. "Does she sleep with the light on when it rains?" I do not know," Preston stammered, looking at Maya for help. "Who cares about lights? I care," I thundered, the sudden volume making the guests jump. "I care because when she was 7 years old, we lived in a basement apartment and a thunderstorm flooded the street. The power went out and she screamed for 3 hours straight because she thought the darkness was going to eat her. I held her until morning. I promised her she would never be in the dark again. Since that day, I have never let her sleep in a room without a nightlight during a storm. Not once in 20 years. Maya let out a sob, a sharp, jagged sound that pierced the silence. She remembered. "You do not know that, Preston," I said, shaking my head. "Because you are not her father. You are just a tourist in her life." I took another step closer. "How about breakfast, Preston? What happens if Maya eats a peanut?" Preston rolled his eyes, regaining some of his arrogance. "This is ridiculous. She is a grown woman. She eats what she wants." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. The guests held their breath, wondering if I was pulling out a weapon. In a way, I was. I pulled out a yellow EpiPen. I held it up for the room to see. "If Maya eats a single peanut, her throat will close up in 3 minutes," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Her heart will stop in 5. I have carried this pen in my pocket every single day for 23 years. Every time we go out to eat, I check the menu. Every time she goes to a party, I worry. Do you have one of these in your tuxedo pocket?" Preston remained silent. He stared at the yellow tube in my hand, his face draining of color. "No, you do not. I answered for him. Because you do not know her. You do not know that she is allergic to peanuts. You do not know that she hates the color pink even though you forced her bridesmaids to wear it. You do not know that she wants to be a writer, not a socialite. You do not know a single thing about the woman sitting next to you. I lowered the pen, placing it gently on the table in front of Maya. She stared at it as if it were a holy relic. She knew. She knew that pen was the symbol of a love that was vigilant, a love that was terrified of losing her. You see, Preston, I continued, my voice turning hard and cold as steel. You did not come into this family to be a father. You did not come here to protect her. You came here because you saw a vulnerability you could exploit. I looked up at the crowd, addressing the room at large. This man looked at my daughter, and he did not see a person. He saw a bridge to legitimacy, a bridge to my money. Preston stood up so fast his chair toppled over backward, crashing onto the floor with a deafening bang. That is enough, he shouted, his face turning a violent shade of purple. I have listened to your senile ramblings long enough. You are jealous, old man. You are jealous because she loves me. You are trying to humiliate us because you cannot stand that you have been replaced. He pointed a shaking finger at me. Security, get this man out of here. Now he is disturbing the peace. He is ruining my daughter's wedding. Preston lunged toward me, moving around the table, his hands reaching out as if to grab the microphone or perhaps to strangle me. He was desperate. He could feel the room turning against him. He could feel the eyes of the investors boring into his back. He needed to silence me. But he never reached me. A massive figure stepped out from the shadows near the cake table. It was Marcus, the security guard whose father drove the Chevy I had fixed. Marcus moved with the speed of a linebacker. He stepped directly into Preston's path, his chest acting as a solid wall. "Sit down, sir," Marcus said, his voice calm but authoritative. Preston slammed into Marcus, bouncing off the large guard chest. He stumbled back, looking shocked. "Do you know who I am?" Preston screamed. "I am the host of this event. I pay your salary. I said throw him out." "Actually," Marcus said, crossing his thick arms over his chest, "Mr. Banks is the one who signed the checks tonight, and Mr. Banks has the floor, so I suggest you sit down before I have to assist you." The room erupted in whispers. The revelation that I had paid for the security too was another blow to Preston's facade. He looked around, realizing he had no allies. The waiters were glaring at him, the security was blocking him, and the guests were looking at him like he was a specimen under a microscope. Preston straightened his jacket, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. He looked at me with pure hatred. "Fine," he spat. "Talk. Say your piece. It does not change anything. Maya knows who I am. She knows I love her. She knows I am a man of the future, not a relic of the past." I smiled. It was a sad smile. "She knows who you pretend to be, Preston," I said. "But she does not know why you are really here." I turned back to Maya. She was looking at me, her eyes wide and pleading. She wanted me to stop. She wanted to go back to the fantasy where she was a princess and Preston was a king. "But you cannot live in a castle built on quicksand." "Maya," I said gently, "he did not ask to marry your mother because he fell in love with her charm. And he did not offer to walk you down the aisle because he wanted a daughter." I pointed a finger at Preston, who was now leaning against the table, breathing heavily. He looked at me and he saw an old man. He saw a bricklayer with a bad back and a simple life, and he made a calculation. He thought I was weak, he thought I was dying, and most importantly, he thought I was sitting on a gold mine that I was too stupid to understand. I took a deep breath, preparing to deliver the blow that would sever the emotional tie forever. He is not waiting for grandchildren, Maya. He is waiting for my obituary. He is waiting for the day he can put me in the ground so he can sell the building you grew up in to pay for his gambling debts. He does not want to be your father. He wants to be my beneficiary. The words hit the room like a physical shockwave. A collective gasp went up from the tables. Maya covered her mouth with her hands, a sob escaping her throat. She looked at Preston, waiting for him to deny it, waiting for him to scream that it was a lie. But Preston said nothing. He just stared at me, his eyes cold and dead. In that silence, the truth screamed louder than any shout. He had been exposed not just as a thief, but as a monster who had preyed on a family desire for love. I tapped the microphone. "I told you he didn't know you," I said to Maya, my voice breaking slightly with the weight of the moment. "But I do. I know you deserve better than to be an investment strategy. I know you deserve a father who would die for you, not one who is waiting for me to die." I signaled to the technician in the booth. "Now," I said, my voice hardening again, returning to the steel of the foreman. "Let us look at the price tag of his love." The screen behind me flickered back to life. The emotional dismantling was complete. Now it was time for the forensic evidence. The blue light from the projector screen cast a ghostly pallor over Preston's face. He was staring at the bank statement displayed behind me, his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide with the panic of a magician whose trapdoor has just jammed in front of a live audience. The room was deadly silent, the kind of silence where you can hear the ice melting in the glasses. 300 people were looking at the numbers on the screen, trying to make sense of the columns and rows, but I was not going to let them do the math themselves. I was going to teach the class. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and pulled out a folded sheaf of papers. I snapped them open with a sharp crack that echoed like a whip. "You all heard Mr. Sterling speak earlier," I said, walking slowly along the edge of the stage. "You heard him boast. You heard him claim that he spared no expense for his beloved stepdaughter. He told you he spent $100,000 on this wedding, and you clapped, you cheered, you thought he was a saint." I held the papers up high, turning them so the front tables could see the letterhead. "Well, he told you half the truth. $100,000 was indeed spent. But the question you should be asking is whose $100,000 was it?" I looked at Maya. She was trembling now, her hands gripping the table so hard her knuckles were white. She recognized the logo on the papers. It was the logo of the community bank where I had opened her savings account when she was 12 years old. "Last Tuesday," I continued, my voice steady and cold, "I transferred $100,000 into a joint account I share with my daughter. It was my life savings, Maya. It was the money I put aside from 40 years of waking up at 4 in the morning. It was the money I saved by fixing my own truck, by living in a one-bedroom apartment, by wearing this suit that you hate so much. It was my retirement. It was my safety net. And I gave it to you because I thought you might need it for a house, for a future." I took a step closer to the head table looming over Preston. "But you never saw that money, did you, Maya, because you never checked that account. You trusted him to manage the finances, and that was your mistake." I pointed to the screen behind me. "Look at the transaction log. October 12th, 9 a.m. The money comes in from Luther Banks. 10:30 a.m. The money goes out. Wire transfer." I turned to Preston, my eyes boring into his. "Tell them where it went, Preston. Tell these fine people where you sent my retirement fund. Did it go to the florist? Did it go to the venue? Did it go to the charity you claim to support?" Preston said nothing. He was sweating profusely now, the drops running down his temple, ruining his spray tan. "I will tell them," I roared. "It went to Golden Sands Holdings in the Cayman Islands." A ripple of confusion went through the room. "For those of you who do not know," I said, addressing the crowd, "Golden Sands is not a wedding planner. It is a shell company for an offshore gambling syndicate. It is a black hole where desperate men throw money they do not have to cover bets they should not have made." The gasps started then, low and shocked. "He took my sweat," I said, my voice dropping to a growl. "He took 40 years of my broken back and my aching knees, and he threw it onto a blackjack table to pay off a debt. He stole your inheritance, Maya. He stole your future to pay for his past sins, and then he stood on this stage and took a bow for it." Preston slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "That is a lie," he screamed, his voice cracking. "That is a fabricated document. He is trying to frame me. I am a wealthy man. I have assets. Assets." I laughed, a dry, harsh sound. "You have nothing, Preston. You are a ghost." I walked back to the center of the stage. "You want to talk about assets? Let us talk about tonight. Let us talk about the here and now." I looked out at the guests. "I hope you are all enjoying the meal. The filet mignon was cooked perfectly, was it not? The lobster was fresh. The champagne is vintage. It is a meal fit for royalty, just like Maya wanted." I saw heads nodding slowly. People too stunned to stop eating, but too horrified to swallow. "Well, I have some news for you about that meal." I pulled the titanium black card from my pocket. It caught the light of the spotlight, gleaming like a dark star. 15 minutes ago, the general manager came to me. He was ready to shut this party down. He was ready to turn on the house lights and ask you all to leave. Why? Because when he tried to run the final charge for this dinner on Mr. Sterling Platinum card, it was declined. I looked at Preston, who had gone deathly pale. Not once, not twice. 3 times. Insufficient funds. Account frozen. Suspicious activity. The room erupted. The polite whispers turned into loud exclamations. People dropped their forks. The clatter of silverware against china sounded like hail on a tin roof. To be accused of theft is one thing, but to be exposed as broke at your own gala is a social death sentence. I swiped this card, I said, holding it up. I paid the $30,000 bill for the food you are digesting right now. Me, the janitor, the outdated old man, the embarrassment. I walked over to the edge of the stage and looked down at the table where the vice president of First National Bank was sitting. He was a stern man with gray hair. He was staring at Preston with a look of absolute disgust. "Mr. Vice President," I said respectfully, "I believe Mr. Sterling was hoping to close a deal with you tonight. He was hoping to use your investment capital to cover the holes in his sinking ship. I suggest you check your pockets before you leave. A man who steals from his father-in-law will not hesitate to steal from his investors." The vice president stood up slowly. He took his napkin and threw it onto his half-eaten steak. He looked at Preston, shook his head, and turned his back. It was a simple gesture, but it was final. The deal was dead. I turned back to Preston and Maya. "The illusion is over," I said. "The lights are on. There is no rich stepfather. There is no generous benefactor. There is just a con artist and the victims he fooled." Maya was crying hysterically now, her face buried in her hands. Her shoulders shook with the violence of her sobs. She wasn't crying for me. She wasn't crying for the money. She was crying because her identity was dissolving. She had built her entire self-worth on being the stepdaughter of a wealthy man. Without that, she was just Maya Banks, the daughter of a construction worker, and she didn't know how to be that person anymore. Preston stood up again. He looked dangerous now. The charm was gone. The facade was gone. He looked like a rat cornered in an alley. "You think you have won," he hissed at me. "You think waving some papers around changes anything? Maya hates you. She will always hate you. You ruined her big day." I looked at him with pity. Genuine pity. "I didn't ruin her day, Preston," I said. "I saved her life." I turned to the crowd one last time. "You can finish your meal," I said. "It is paid for. But remember who paid for it. It wasn't the man in the tuxedo. It was the man in the work boots. It was the man who knows that you cannot build a skyscraper on a swamp." I signaled the DJ. "Cut the feed," I said. The projector screen went dark. The microphone in my hand went dead. But the silence in the room was louder than any amplifier. I stepped down from the stage. The guests parted for me like the Red Sea, but this time they didn't look away. They looked at me with awe. They looked at me with fear. And as I walked back toward table 25, I heard the sound I had been waiting for. It started with a low boo from the back of the room. Then another. Then a shout. "Fraud," someone yelled. "Thief," another voice cried out. I sat down at my metal table in the corner. I picked up my glass of water. I watched as the room turned on Preston Sterling. The social elite, the people he so desperately wanted to impress, were now looking at him like he was something they had stepped in on the sidewalk. Maya looked up, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. She looked at Preston. Then she looked at the guests. And finally, across the vast expanse of the ballroom, she looked at me. There was no love in her eyes yet. Only shock. Only the terrifying realization that she was free-falling, and the only parachute she had was the one she had tried to cut loose. I raised my glass to her in a silent toast. "Welcome to the real world, baby girl," I whispered. "It is cold, but at least it is honest." Tweet voi tôi sẽ tiếp tục match truyền gây cân này. Đây là phần 11 sự sụp đổ của Maya về văn phòng và định dạng chuẩn cho Voice AI đọc diễn cầm tiếng Anh, 100% không tiêu đề, không ký tu la. "You are lying." The scream tore through the ballroom, shattering the silence like a glass thrown against a wall. It was not a scream of fear. It was a scream of denial. Maya stood up her chair, screeching backward, and pointed a shaking finger at me. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure, desperate rage. The makeup she had spent hours perfecting was running in dark rivets down her cheeks, but she did not care. She cared about one thing: protecting the fantasy. "Dad, you are a liar," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You made those papers up. You are jealous. You have always been jealous of Preston because he is successful, and you are just a nobody." She turned to the crowd, her eyes wide and frantic, pleading with them to believe her. "Do not listen to him," she begged. "My father is sick. He is confused. Preston is a millionaire. He owns buildings in Miami. He has investors in Dubai. This is all a mistake. It is a sick joke. Preston, seeing an opening, stood up next to her. He smoothed his tuxedo jacket, trying to regain his composure. She is right, he announced, his voice trembling slightly but loud enough to carry. This man is mentally unstable. Those documents on the screen, anyone can forge a bank statement on a computer these days. It is slander. I will sue you, Luther. I will sue you for everything you have. I looked at them, the two of them standing there clinging to a sinking ship while the water rose around their necks. It was pathetic, and it was time to end it. You say I am lying, Maya, I asked, my voice calm, deep, and resonant. You say Preston is a millionaire. Yes, she cried, stamping her foot like a petulant child. He is, and he loves me. I nodded slowly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the remote for the projector again. Then let us see what the Federal Bureau of Investigation thinks about his millions. I pressed the button. The screen behind me shifted. The bank statement disappeared. In its place, a new document appeared. It was not a spreadsheet. It was a mugshot. A gasp went through the room so loud it sucked the air out of the space. The photo on the screen was younger. The hair was darker. But the eyes were the same. The cold, predatory eyes of Preston Sterling. Below the photo were the words that sealed his fate. Wanted. Wire fraud. Identity theft. Ponzi scheme. I turned to the technician. Scroll down, I commanded. The document scrolled. Alias Patrick Stone. Alias Peter St. James. Alias Preston Sterling. Status fugitive. I looked back at Maya. She was staring at the screen, her mouth open but no sound coming out. Her hands were trembling so violently that the diamond bracelet on her wrist rattled against the table. Read it, Maya, I said, pointing to the screen. Read the charges. Embezzlement of $3 million from elderly retirees in Florida. Faking investment portfolios. Laundering money through offshore casinos. I took a step closer to her. He is not a businessman, Maya. He is a predator. He finds families with assets and vulnerabilities. He finds women who want to be taken care of, and he bleeds them dry. Preston lunged for the table, trying to grab a steak knife, but Marcus, the security guard, was faster. He stepped in and twisted Preston's arm behind his back, forcing him down into the chair. Sit down, Marcus growled. The show is not over. Maya looked at Preston, who was now pinned to his chair, groaning in pain. She looked at the screen. She looked at the guests who were whispering, pointing, and pulling out their phones to take pictures of the wanted poster. No, she whispered. No, it cannot be. He bought me this dress. He bought me the car. I shook my head, walking until I was standing right in front of the head table. I looked down at my daughter. The little girl I had carried on my shoulders was gone, replaced by a woman I barely recognized. A woman who had been hollowed out by vanity. He bought you nothing, Maya, I said softly. I bought the dress. I bought the car. The money I sent to your account. The money he stole. That is what paid for your lifestyle. Every time he gave you a gift, he was just re-gifting you your own inheritance. Maya looked up at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed and empty. Why are you doing this? She sobbed. Why did you have to do it here? Why couldn't you tell me in private? Why did you have to humiliate me in front of everyone? Because you wouldn't have listened, I said, my voice hardening. Because if I told you in private, you would have called me a liar. You would have chosen him. You did choose him, Maya. I leaned in close, my hands gripping the edge of the table. And that is the hardest truth of all tonight. This is not about money. This is not about fraud. This is about you. Maya flinched, pulling back from me. You stood on that dance floor and you looked me in the eye. I said, my voice trembling with the pain I had suppressed for hours. You told me I was outdated. You told me I was an embarrassment. You told me I did not fit the image. I gestured to Preston, who was now sweating and cursing under his breath. You chose him, I said. But you did not choose him because he loved you. You did not choose him because he was kind. You did not choose him because he was a good father. You chose him because he looked expensive. I stood up straight, addressing the entire room but keeping my eyes locked on hers. You sold me, Maya. You sold 30 years of sacrifice. You sold the man who braided your hair. You sold the man who worked in the freezing cold so you could have a warm bed. And what did you sell me for? You sold me for a tuxedo. You sold me for a fake tan and a leased luxury car. You wanted a prop, not a father. Tears streamed down Maya's face, cutting through the layers of foundation. She shook her head, trying to deny it, but the words were hitting her like physical blows, cracking the shell she had built around her heart. "I am sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I just wanted to be special." "You were special," I roared, making her jump. "You were my daughter." "That should have been enough. But you wanted to be royalty. You wanted to be better than where you came from. You were ashamed of the cement dust on my clothes. You were ashamed of the calluses on my hands." I held up my hands again. "These hands built this city, Maya. There is no shame in these hands. The only shame in this room is sitting right there in that chair wearing a stolen suit and lying to the woman he married." Maya looked at Preston. For the first time, the adoration was gone. She looked at him with horror. She looked at the man she had just married and realized she was looking at a stranger. A criminal. A monster. "You," she stammered, looking at Preston. "You told me you were an investor. You told me my dad was useless." Preston laughed, a cruel, desperate sound. "He is useless," he spat, struggling against Marcus' grip. "He is just a bricklayer with a lucky bank account. And you stupid girl, you made it so easy. You were so desperate to be a princess, you never even checked the books. You handed me the keys to the vault because I told you you were pretty." Maya screamed a raw, animalistic sound of pain and lunged at Preston, hitting his chest with her fists. "You liar! You ruined everything!" Marcus pulled her back gently but firmly. I watched her fall back into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Her perfect wedding was now a crime scene. Her perfect husband was a con man. And her perfect image was shattered into a million pieces. I felt a heavy weight in my chest. I had done it. I had saved her financial future, but I had broken her heart. I had to break it to save it, but the sound of her crying was still the hardest thing I had ever had to hear. I was about to turn away to walk back to my table when I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. It was Connor. My son-in-law had been sitting silently through the entire exchange. He had watched the bank statements. He had watched the wanted poster. He had watched his wife scream at her father and defend a criminal. He had watched her admit that she wanted image over substance. Connor stood up. He moved slowly, like a man waking up from a long coma. He looked at the chaos around him. He looked at Preston being held down by security. He looked at me, standing there with the weight of the truth on my shoulders, and then he looked at Maya. Maya looked up at him through her tears, reaching out a hand. "Connor," she sobbed. "Connor, please, help me. Make them stop. Tell them it is going to be okay." Connor did not take her hand. He looked at her with a calm, sad expression that was far more devastating than anger. "It is not going to be okay, Maya," he said softly. What Maya asked, wiping her eyes. "What do you mean, we can fix this? We can get an annulment from Preston. We can sue him. We still have the wedding gifts. We can start over." Connor shook his head. "You do not get it, do you?" he said. "Get what?" Maya asked, her voice rising in panic. "You didn't just lie to your dad," Maya, Connor said. "You lied to me." I never lied to you," Maya stammered. "You told me we were building a life together," Connor said. "But you were just building a set, a stage. You treated me like a prop, just like you treated your dad. You told me not to talk to him because he was low class. You made me sit there and ignore him while he sat by the toilet." Connor looked at me, and for the first time in years I saw a spark of steel in his eyes. "I let you do it," Connor continued, "because I thought you were just stressed. I thought you just wanted everything to be perfect. But tonight, watching you defend him, watching you scream at the only man who has ever actually loved you, I realized something, what Maya whispered. I realized I am just the next prop," Connor said. "Once I am outdated, once I don't fit the image, you will replace me too." Connor reached for his left hand. He gripped the gold band on his ring finger. "Connor, no!" Maya screamed, standing up. "No, do not do this. Everyone is watching. Let them watch," Connor said. "At least this part is real." He pulled the ring off. It slid off easily as if it had never really belonged there. He held it up for a second, the gold catching the light of the projector screen that still displayed Preston Wanted poster. Then he opened his hand. The ring hit the table with a small, hollow ping. It spun for a second, a tiny golden wheel, before coming to a stop right next to the EpiPen I had placed there earlier. "I am done," Maya, Connor said. "I am out." He turned to me. He didn't bow. He didn't shake my hand. He just nodded, a nod of respect. A nod from one man to another, acknowledging that the lesson had been learned. Then he turned and walked away. He walked past the head table, past the cake, past the stunned guests, and out the double doors of the ballroom without looking back once. Maya stood there alone. Her stepfather was in handcuffs. Her husband was gone. Her father was standing before her, having stripped away every lie she had ever told. She looked at the empty chair where Connor had been. Then she let out a wail that echoed through the silent room, a sound of total and absolute desolation. I signaled the technician one last time. "Lights," I said. The house lights flooded the room, blindingly bright, exposing every tear, every stain, and every broken dream. There were no more shadows to hide in. The play was over, and the reality was just beginning. I stood on the edge of the dance floor, holding the microphone like a judge gavel that had just delivered a verdict. The silence in the ballroom was heavy, a suffocating blanket woven from shock and scandal. Connor had turned to leave. He had dropped his ring. He had taken those first few steps toward freedom. But then he stopped. I watched him. I saw his shoulders heave. I saw his hands clench into fists at his sides. He was a good man, a gentle man, but even the calmest ocean has a breaking point. He was not just leaving a marriage, he was leaving a crime scene, and he realized he could not leave without giving a statement. Connor turned around. He did not look at Maya, who was still weeping into her hands. He did not look at Preston, who was sitting slumped in his chair, defeated and dangerous. He looked at me. He walked back toward me. His steps were heavy but determined. The guests watched him breathlessly. This was the groom, the man who was supposed to be dancing the night away, the man who was supposed to be drinking champagne and dreaming of a honeymoon in Bora Bora. Instead, he looked like a man walking to his own execution, or perhaps his own resurrection. He reached me and held out his hand, not for a handshake, but for the microphone. I looked into his eyes. I saw pain there, deep and raw, but I also saw respect. He finally understood who was holding the line. I handed him the microphone. It was his turn. Connor gripped the device, his knuckles white. He turned to face the head table. The feedback whined slightly, a high-pitched screech that made everyone flinch, but Connor did not seem to hear it. "Maya," he said. His voice was not loud. It was broken. It cracked on her name, a sound so full of hurt that I saw several women in the audience bring their napkins to their mouths. Maya looked up. Her eyes were swollen, her mascara smeared into a raccoon-like mask. She looked at him with a glimmer of hope. She thought he was coming back to save her. She thought he was going to offer forgiveness. "Connor," she whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. "Connor, please, we can fix this." Connor did not move toward her. He stood his ground next to me. "Fix this," he repeated, his voice hollow. "How do you fix a foundation that does not exist?" "Maya." He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "For 2 years you told me stories about your father. You told me he was a burden. You told me he was embarrassing. You told me he was a bitter old man who did not understand the world." He pointed at me without looking away from her. "I believed you. I trusted you. You are my wife, or you were supposed to be. I treated this man with coldness because you told me he deserved it. I sat him by the toilet because you said he would be more comfortable there. I let you cut him out of our lives because you said he was toxic." Connor's voice began to rise, gaining strength and volume. "But he was not the toxic one, was he, Maya? He was the bank." Maya sobbed, shaking her head frantically. "No, Connor, it is not about the money. It is exactly about the money," Connor shouted, causing Maya to recoil. "You told me the wedding was paid for by Preston. You told me the down payment on our house was a gift from Preston. You told me the honeymoon was a surprise from Preston." He laughed, a dry, bitter sound that echoed off the high ceilings. "I spent the last 6 months thanking Preston. I shook his hand. I brought him expensive scotch. I called him Dad. I let him make toasts about his generosity. And all the while he was stealing from the very man I was disrespecting." Connor turned to look at Preston, who was glaring at the floor, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. "You let me praise a thief, Maya. You let me build my gratitude on a lie. You made me an accomplice to your cruelty." He turned back to Maya, his face twisting with anguish. "I could forgive a mistake, Maya. I could forgive bad credit. I could even forgive you for being embarrassed by your dad, because we all have family issues. But I cannot forgive the manipulation. You lied to me to make me despise my own father-in-law. You used my trust to isolate him. You turned me into a weapon against him. Connor." "No," Maya wailed, standing up and reaching for him across the table. "I did it for us. I wanted us to look good. I wanted you to be proud of our family. Proud? Connor asked incredulously. You think I am proud right now? You think I want to be part of a family that treats people like disposable objects based on their bank account balance? He looked down at his tuxedo, looking at the expensive fabric as if it were contaminated. I am a software engineer, Maya. I write code. In my world, if a line of code is bad, the whole program crashes. You cannot hide a bug. You have to fix it or delete it. He looked her dead in the eye. And this marriage, it is a fatal error. The room gasped. It was final. It was absolute. There was no coming back from that. I am annulling this marriage, Connor declared, his voice ringing with finality. I am not going to sign the certificate. I am not going on the honeymoon, and I am certainly not going to live in a house paid for with stolen money. Maya collapsed back into her chair, her legs giving out. She buried her face in the tablecloth, her shoulders heaving with the weight of her destruction. Connor lowered the microphone. He turned to me. The anger drained from his face, leaving only exhaustion and shame. He looked at me, at my old suit, at my gray hair, at the eyes that had seen too much. He bowed. It was not a nod. It was a deep, respectful bow. He bent at the waist, humbling himself before the bricklayer. Mr. Banks, he said, his voice trembling slightly, without the amplification of the microphone, I am so sorry. I should have asked. I should have visited you. I should have been a man, and made up my own mind instead of listening to the gossip. I disrespected you, and for that I will be ashamed for the rest of my life. I looked at the boy. He was young, he had been foolish, but he was owning it. And in my book, owning your mistakes is the first step to rebuilding. I reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. It was heavy and warm. Stand up, son, I said softly. You didn't know. You were looking at a blueprint that was drawn wrong. Now you know. Go build something real. Connor nodded, tears standing in his eyes. Thank you, sir. He handed the microphone back to me. He turned and started to walk away again. And that was when the dam broke. Preston Sterling exploded. The humiliation had been building inside him like pressure in a boiler. He had been exposed as a fraud. He had been mocked by the guests. He had lost his investors. And now he had watched a young man destroy his stepdaughter dreams and bow to his enemy. It was too much for his ego to handle. You son of a bitch, Preston screamed. He surged up from his chair, knocking the heavy table forward. Silverware crashed to the floor. Glasses shattered. He did not care. His eyes were wild, bloodshot, and focused entirely on me. You think you can come here and ruin me, he roared. You think you can destroy my life with your lies? You old piece of garbage, I will kill you, he charged. The guests screamed, scattering out of the way. Marcus, the security guard, shouted and lunged forward, but he was on the wrong side of the table. Preston had a clear path. He was younger than me, he was heavier than me, and he was fueled by the adrenaline of a man who has lost everything. He came at me like a bull, his hands reaching for my throat, his face twisted into a mask of pure violence. Maya screamed, "Dad!" I stood still. I did not run. I did not flinch. I did not raise my hands in a boxing stance. Preston thought he was attacking an old man. He thought he was attacking a retiree who spent his days watching daytime television and napping. He forgot who I was. I was a bricklayer. For 40 years I had walked on steel beams 50 stories in the air where a single misstep meant death. I had carried bags of cement that weighed more than he did. My body was old, yes, but it was built on a foundation of balance and core strength that a lifetime of country club lunches could never replicate. I waited. I watched his eyes. I watched his footing. He was clumsy. He was running on rage, not technique. He was leading with his head, his center of gravity thrown forward in his desperation to hurt me. When he was 2 feet away, I moved. It was a simple movement. Efficient. The kind of movement you learn when you are dodging a swinging crane hook on a job site. I stepped to the left, a quick, sharp pivot on my heel. At the same time, I extended my right leg, just a few inches, just enough to catch his shiny, expensive dress shoe. Preston momentum did the rest. He tripped. It was almost comical in its slow-motion inevitability. His arms flailed, trying to grab onto air. His eyes widened as he realized the ground was coming up to meet him. But it was not the ground. Directly behind where I had been standing was the cake table. The wedding cake was a masterpiece. 5 tiers of lemon chiffon and buttercream icing towering 3 feet high, decorated with sugar roses and silver pearls. It had cost $4,000. Preston flew past me, his hands grasping at nothing, and plunged face first into the cake. The sound was a soft, wet thwack. The table groaned and collapsed under his weight. The cake exploded. Frosting flew everywhere, splattering the guests in the front row. The top tier rolled across the dance floor, coming to a rest at the feet of the vice president of First National Bank. Preston lay there in the ruins of the confectionery disaster. He was covered in white icing. A sugar rose was stuck to his ear. He groaned, trying to push himself up, but his hand slipped in the buttercream and he flopped back down. The room was silent for a heartbeat. And then someone laughed. It was a nervous laugh at first, but then it spread. It was the release of tension. The villain had not just been defeated. He had been humiliated in the most slapstick way possible. I stood over him, brushing a speck of icing from my lapel. I looked down at the man who had called me outdated. "You know, Preston," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the silence. "You were right about one thing." Preston looked up, spitting cake out of his mouth, his eyes filled with hate and frosting. What he gurgled. "You really do know how to make an impact," I said. Marcus arrived then, hauling Preston up by the back of his tuxedo jacket, which was now ruined by grease and sugar. "Get him out of here," I said to Marcus, "and call the police. I think the FBI might want to lick the frosting off him before they book him." Marcus nodded, grinning. "With pleasure, Mr. Banks." I looked at the crowd. They were applauding. Not politely, wildly. They were cheering for the old bricklayer who had just matadored the bull. But I did not bow. I did not smile. I looked at Connor, who was standing by the door watching. He nodded to me again. Then I looked at Maya. She was sitting alone at the head table, staring at the spot where the cake used to be. She looked broken. I felt a pang of sadness. This was a tragedy disguised as a victory, but sometimes you have to burn the field to kill the weeds. I turned and walked back to table 25. My work was done. The sound of a crowd turning against you is a physical thing. It starts as a low rumble like a subway train approaching from a distance, and then it swells into a roar that vibrates in your chest. I stood by table 25, watching the room transform. 10 minutes ago, these people were raising glasses of champagne to Preston Sterling. They were envying his wealth, admiring his suit, and laughing at his jokes. Now they were looking at a man covered in lemon chiffon cake and seeing him for exactly what he was: a clown. The first boo came from the back of the room near the bar. It was low and guttural. Then another joined in. Then a shout: "Fraud, liar, pay your bills, you deadbeat." It was mob mentality in its purest form. These were wealthy, sophisticated people. They wore silk and diamonds. They drove imported cars. But underneath the polish, they were just a pack of wolves, and they had just realized that the alpha male was actually a sheep in disguise. They felt foolish. They felt tricked. And there is nothing a rich person hates more than being made to look like a fool. I watched the vice president of First National Bank standing near the fallen cake. He took out his phone. He did not call the police. He opened his camera app. He held it up, aiming it directly at Preston, who was struggling to wipe frosting from his eyes while Marcus held him in an arm lock. Preston Sterling, the vice president, said loud enough for the video to pick up. "The man who tried to swindle $3 million from my bank. Smile for the compliance department, Preston." That broke the dam. Suddenly a sea of glowing screens rose up in the darkened room. Everyone was filming. The bridesmaids who had been fawning over Maya all day stepped back. They did not help her. They did not comfort her. Two of them actually turned their backs and started typing frantically on their phones, probably deleting their social media posts that tagged the wedding or texting their other friends to gossip about the disaster. It was brutal. It was the modern-day equivalent of the stocks in the town square. Preston was not just going to jail, he was going to become a meme. His humiliation was being live-streamed to thousands of people in real time. I looked at Maya. She was standing alone at the head table. The space around her was empty. Connor was gone. Preston was being dragged toward the exit by Marcus, leaving a trail of white icing and ruined dignity on the parquet floor. Her guests were jeering. Her friends were recording. She looked small. The massive ballroom, which had seemed like a palace an hour ago, now looked like a cavernous mouth ready to swallow her whole. She scanned the room, her eyes wild and panicked. She was looking for a lifeline. She was looking for someone to blame. Her eyes landed on me. I was sitting calmly at my metal table, my hands folded in my lap. I was the only person in the room not filming. I was the only person not shouting. I was just witnessing. Maya's face twisted. The shock melted away, replaced by a surge of pure, misdirected fury. She grabbed a wine glass from the table and threw it. It shattered on the floor nowhere near me, but the violence of the action made the nearby guests recoil. "You!" she screamed. She stepped over the train of her ruined dress and started running toward me. She stumbled twice, kicking off her expensive heels, leaving them where they fell. She ran barefoot across the dance floor, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The crowd parted for her, but they did not go silent. They kept filming. This was the second act of the tragedy, and they were not going to miss it. Maya reached my table and slammed her hands down on the metal surface. Her hair was coming undone. Her mascara was smeared across her cheeks like war paint. She looked deranged. "Are you happy now?" she shrieked, her voice raw and scratching against her throat. "Are you satisfied? Look at this. Look at what you did." I looked at her. I did not stand up. I stayed seated, grounding myself. "I am not happy, Maya," I said quietly. "You ruined my life," she screamed, leaning over the table, her spit flying onto my face. "You ruined everything. This was supposed to be my night. It was supposed to be perfect. And you destroyed it. You destroyed my marriage. You destroyed my reputation. Everyone is laughing at me, Dad. Everyone is laughing." She gestured wildly at the crowd, who were indeed whispering and pointing. "I hate you," she sobbed. "I hate you so much. You are a monster. You couldn't stand to see me happy. You couldn't stand that I found someone better than you. So you had to burn it all down." I listened to her. I let her words hit me. They hurt. Of course they hurt. No father wants to hear his child say they hate him. But I also knew where the words were coming from. They were coming from a place of deep shame. She was lashing out because the alternative was to look in the mirror, and she was not ready for that yet. "Maya," I said, my voice steady and low, cutting through her hysteria. "I did not burn anything down." "You did," she cried, pounding her fists on the table. "You humiliated Preston. You drove Connor away. You made a scene." I shook my head slowly. "No, Maya. I did not drive Connor away. The truth drove Connor away. I did not humiliate Preston. His own actions humiliated him." I stood up then, slowly, deliberately. I towered over her, not to intimidate her, but to make her look up. To make her see me. "You are angry because the play is over," I said. "You wrote a script, Maya. A script where you were the princess and Preston was the king and I was the peasant. It was a nice story, but it was fiction." I pointed to the door where Marcus had just shoved Preston into the waiting arms of two uniformed police officers who had arrived at the entrance. "That man is a criminal," I said. "He stole my money. He stole your money. He was going to leave you destitute. If I had stayed silent, if I had let this wedding finish, you would have woken up tomorrow morning married to a felon with $0 in your bank account and a foreclosure notice on your door." So what Maya screamed, tears streaming down her face. "At least I would have had a husband. At least I would have had my dignity for one more day. You took that away. You stripped me naked in front of 300 people. You were already naked, Maya," I said softly. "You just didn't know it because you were wearing clothes made of lies." I leaned closer to her, my eyes locking onto hers. "You say I ruined your life. No, daughter. I saved your life. I stopped you from walking off a cliff. I stopped you from being an accessory to federal fraud." "But you broke me," she whispered, her voice breaking into a whimper. "You broke me, Dad." I reached out to touch her hand, but she pulled it away, recoiling as if I were fire. "I didn't break you, Maya," I said. "I just turned on the lights." I gestured to the room, to the mess, to the broken glass, to the cake on the floor. "You built a life in the dark because it looked prettier that way, but you cannot live in the dark forever." I turned on the lights, and yes, the room is messy. Yes, there is garbage on the floor, but that garbage is yours, Maya. You brought it in. You arranged it. All I did was show you where it was so you wouldn't trip over it and break your neck." Maya stared at me. For a second I thought she understood. I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. But then the shame took over again. It was too much for her to process in one moment. The fall was too high. She shook her head, stepping back from me. "I never want to see you again," she hissed. "You are dead to me. Do you hear me? You are outdated, and you are dead." She turned around. She did not walk with the grace of a bride. She ran. She ran toward the double doors, pushing past the guests who were still filming. She held her hands over her face, trying to hide from the cameras, trying to hide from the reality that was crashing down around her. Maya, wait. The voice came from behind me. It was Vanessa. My ex-wife appeared from the shadows near the kitchen. She looked disheveled. Her red dress was wrinkled and she had lost an earring. She looked frantic, but unlike Maya, her eyes were not filled with pain. They were filled with venom. She marched up to me, stopping just long enough to spit at my feet. "You bastard," she seethed. "You petty, jealous bastard. You think you won? You think this makes you a hero? You just died alone, Luther. I hope you enjoy your money because it is the only thing that will ever hold your hand again." She didn't wait for a response. She didn't check to see if Preston was okay. She didn't care about the man she had just spent hours defending. She only cared about catching Maya, about spinning the narrative, about finding a way to salvage the wreckage of their social standing. She ran after Maya, her heels clicking frantically on the floor. "Maya, wait for Mommy. We can sue him. We can fix this." I watched them go. Mother and daughter running out of the ballroom, leaving a trail of broken promises behind them. The doors swung shut. The room was quiet again. The booing had stopped. The guests were looking at me now. The phones were lowering. I stood there by table 25. I was the only family member left. I looked at the table. The cold chicken was still there. The water glass was still full. I picked up the glass. My hand was steady. I had lost my daughter. I knew that. Maybe for a year. Maybe forever. But I had kept my promise. I had protected her. Even if she hated me for it, I had protected her. A young waiter approached me tentatively. He looked scared. "Mr. Banks," he whispered, is there anything else you need?" I looked at the boy. He had kindness in his eyes. "No, son," I said, placing the glass down. "I think I am done here." I unbuttoned my jacket. I adjusted my cuffs. "I am going home," I said. I walked toward the exit. I did not look back at the head table. I did not look back at the cake. I walked past the guests who parted silently to let me through. Some of them nodded. Some of them looked down in shame. I walked out of the ballroom and into the cool night air. The silence of the street was a relief. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that didn't smell like perfume and lies. It was over, and it was just beginning. The night air outside the Grand Plaza Hotel was usually filled with the quiet hum of luxury cars and the polite chatter of valets, but tonight it was screaming. Blue and red lights sliced through the darkness, bouncing off the polished marble columns and the terrified faces of the guests who had spilled out onto the sidewalk to watch the finale of the evening. I stood at the top of the stairs, my hands in my pockets, watching the inevitable conclusion of a tragedy I had been forced to write. Preston Sterling was not going quietly. 2 uniformed officers had him pressed against the hood of a patrol car. The icing from the cake was still smeared on his tuxedo, mixing with the sweat and the dirt from the floor, creating a gray paste that made him look like a melting wax figure. He was thrashing and kicking, screaming about his rights, screaming about his lawyers, and screaming about how this was all a misunderstanding. "Get your hands off me!" he bellowed, his voice cracking with desperation. "Do you know who I am? I am a community leader. I am a philanthropist. That man standing there is a liar. He is senile. He framed me." The officer securing his wrists did not care about his philanthropy. He cared about the federal warrant that had just popped up on his computer. "Preston Sterling, you are under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and forgery." The officer recited, his voice calm and bored. "Forgery." Preston screamed, spinning his head around to look at me. "I never forged anything." A man in a plain suit stepped out of an unmarked sedan that had pulled up behind the patrol cars. He walked up to Preston holding a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a stack of documents. "We found these in your briefcase in the bridal suite, Mr. Sterling," the detective said. "It is a power of attorney transfer for the property at 450 Highland Avenue. It transfers ownership from Luther Banks to Preston Sterling. It is dated for next week, and it is signed by Luther Banks." The detective looked up at me, standing on the stairs. "Mr. Banks, did you sign this document?" I looked down at Preston. He stopped struggling. He hung his head, knowing the game was truly up. He had not just stolen the wedding money. He had prepared the paperwork to steal my home the moment he convinced everyone I was mentally incompetent. "No, detective," I said, my voice carrying over the noise of the sirens. "I did not sign that. My hands may be rough, but they are not stupid." The detective nodded. That is what we thought. Book him. The officers hauled Preston off the hood of the car. As they dragged him toward the back seat of the cruiser, he looked back at Maya and Vanessa, who were standing huddled together near the valet stand, shivering in the night air. "Vanessa, call the lawyer," Preston screamed. "Get the money from the safe. Bail me out. Do not let them take me." Vanessa did not move. She stared at him with a mixture of horror and calculation. She knew there was no money in the safe. She knew there was no lawyer on retainer. She was watching her golden ticket go to jail, and she was already trying to figure out how to distance herself from the wreckage. They shoved Preston into the car and slammed the door. The image of his face pressed against the glass, shouting silent obscenities, was the last thing I saw of the man who had tried to erase me. I walked slowly down the stairs. The crowd of guests parted for me again. They were silent now. The excitement of the live stream had faded, replaced by the sober reality of police lights and handcuffs. I reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped in front of Maya and Vanessa. Maya was sitting on a concrete planter, her bare feet dirty from the sidewalk. She was hugging her knees, rocking back and forth. She looked like a child who had lost her parents in a mall. Vanessa was standing over her, pacing frantically, trying to call people on her phone, but nobody was answering. When I stopped, they both looked up. "Are you happy?" Vanessa hissed, snapping her phone shut. "You sent him to prison. You satisfied your petty vendetta. I hope you are proud of yourself, Luther." I looked at my ex-wife. Even now, with the lights flashing on her face, she could not admit the truth. "I did not send him to prison, Vanessa," I said wearily. "The law did. His actions did. I just made the phone call." Maya looked up at me. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Where am I supposed to go?" she whispered. I looked at her. "What do you mean?" "They seized the apartment," she said, her voice trembling. "The police told me. Preston apartment, the one we were staying in. It is being sealed as part of the investigation. It was paid for with stolen funds. I cannot go back there. Connor is gone. I have nowhere to go." She looked at Vanessa. "Mom, can I come home with you?" Vanessa froze. She looked away, biting her lip. "Well, honey, you know my place is small," Vanessa said, her voice tight. "And with Preston accounts frozen, I might have some trouble with the rent myself next month. I do not know if I can support both of us." I watched them. The rats were already turning on each other. Maya's face crumpled. She looked at me. It was a look of pure desperation. She hated me, yes, but she needed me. And she assumed that because I was her father, because I had always been the safety net, I would be there to catch her again. "Dad," she said softly, standing up and taking a step toward me. "I know you are angry, and I know I said some terrible things, but I am your daughter. You cannot let me sleep on the street." She reached out to touch my arm. "The apartment on Oak Street," she said. "The one Connor and I live in. We can go there. I know the rent is due next week, and with Connor gone, I cannot afford it, but maybe you could help, just for a few months, until I get back on my feet, until this blows over." I looked at her hand on my sleeve. I remembered the times I had held that hand. I remembered the times I had paid her rent when she was in college. I remembered the times I had bailed her out of credit card debt. But then I remembered the EpiPen on the table. I remembered her telling me I was outdated. I remembered her standing by while Preston mocked me. I stepped back. Her hand fell to her side. "You want to go back to the Oak Street apartment?" I asked. "Yes," she said, nodding eagerly. "It is safe there. It is home." I nodded slowly. "You know that apartment is in a very nice building," I said. "Doorman, gym, rooftop terrace. It is in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city." "I know," Maya said, confused. "Why are you talking about the building? Do you know who owns that building?" "Maya," I asked. She shook her head. "Some management company, Skyline Properties or something. Why does it matter?" "It matters," I said, my voice hardening, "because Skyline Properties is a subsidiary of Banks Construction." Maya blinked. She stared at me. Vanessa stopped pacing and turned around. "What did you say?" Vanessa asked. "I own the building," I said simply. "I bought it 5 years ago. I renovated it. I manage it." Maya's mouth fell open. "You? You are my landlord." "I am," I confirmed. "And for the last 3 years, ever since you and Connor moved in, I have been the one approving your lease renewals." "But," Maya stammered. But the rent is so high. We pay $2,500 a month. Connor always complained it was expensive, but we managed. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. $2,500, I repeated. Maya, look around that neighborhood. Look at the listings. A 2-bedroom apartment with a terrace in that district goes for $5,000 a month. Minimum. Maya went pale. You have been paying half price, I said. I told the management office to subsidize your unit. I told them to list it as a promotional rate for family. Every single month for 3 years I have paid the other $2,500 out of my own pocket. That is $90,000, Maya. $90,000 I gave you silently so you could live in luxury while you looked down on me for living in a simple flat. Maya stepped back as if I had slapped her. You paid our rent, she whispered. I did, I said. I paid it because I wanted you to be safe. I wanted you to have a nice home. I didn't want credit. I didn't want to thank you. I just wanted my daughter to be comfortable. I looked at Vanessa. She was staring at me with a look of total shock. She had spent years calling me a failure, not knowing I was the one keeping a roof over her daughter's head. But tonight I continued, my voice dropping to a tone of finality. Tonight you stood on a stage and told 300 people that I was useless. You told them I was an embarrassment. You told them Preston was the provider. I took a deep breath. Well, Maya, the provider, is going to prison, and the embarrassment is going home. So what does that mean? Maya asked, her voice rising in panic. Dad, what does that mean? It means the subsidy is over, I said. I pulled my phone out. I tapped the screen, sending a message to the property manager. I just instructed the office to update your lease terms. Effective immediately, the rent for Unit 4B reverts to the market rate, $5,000 a month. Maya gasped. I cannot afford that. I don't have a job right now. I spent my savings on the honeymoon clothes. Connor is gone. How am I supposed to pay $5,000? That is not my problem, I said. The words felt heavy in my mouth, but they were necessary. You wanted to be independent, Maya. You wanted to be high class. You wanted to distance yourself from the bricklayer. Well, this is what independence looks like. It costs full price. But I will be evicted, she cried. They will throw me out. Then you better start looking for a job, I said. Or you better start looking for a cheaper apartment. There are plenty of places in the neighborhood I grew up in. The rent is cheap there. Of course, there is no doorman, and the roof leaks sometimes, but it builds character. Maya looked at me with horror. You are kicking me out. You are making your own daughter homeless. I am not kicking you out, I said. I am treating you like an adult. You are 30 years old, Maya. You are not a child anymore. You chose a life of image over substance. Now you have to pay the bill for that image. I turned to Vanessa. And Vanessa, I said, I suggest you check your own finances. I have a feeling Preston might have leveraged your condo too. Men like him don't usually leave any stone unturned. Vanessa's face went gray. She hadn't thought of that. She turned and started running toward the valet stand, screaming for her car. I looked back at Maya one last time. She was standing alone on the sidewalk, barefoot in her ruined wedding dress, shivering in the cold wind of reality. Dad, please, she whispered. I am going home, Maya, I said. I have to be up early tomorrow. I have a building to manage. I turned my back on her. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around to hug her, to write a check to fix it. But I knew that if I fixed it now, I would break her forever. She needed to fall. She needed to hit the bottom so she could find her own feet. I walked toward my old truck parked around the corner. It wasn't a luxury sedan. It had a dent in the bumper and it smelled like sawdust. But it was paid for. It was real. And as I started the engine and drove away, leaving the flashing lights and the weeping bride in the rearview mirror, I knew that for the first time in a long time, I was driving toward peace. The water of the lake was smooth as a sheet of glass, reflecting the gray morning sky, like a mirror that had no cracks and no lies. I sat in my folding chair, the canvas stretched tight under my weight, watching the red and white bobber float lazily on the surface. For the first time in 30 years, I did not feel the urge to check the time. I did not feel the phantom weight of a cement bag on my shoulder. I did not feel the crushing pressure of hiding my success to protect the fragile egos of the people around me. The silence out here was different from the silence in my apartment. The silence in the apartment was lonely. The silence here was peaceful. It was the sound of a man who had finally put down a heavy load he had been carrying for too long. But peace is a fragile thing, especially when you have a smartphone in your pocket. It buzzed against my thigh, vibrating with a persistence that was almost aggressive. I did not reach for it. I knew who it was. It had been buzzing like that for 7 days. 53 missed calls from Maya, 28 missed calls from Vanessa, 12 voicemails from a number I did not recognize, which I assumed was whatever cheap lawyer they had managed to scrape together. I reeled in my line, checking the bait. The worm was gone, eaten by a clever fish that knew how to take what it wanted without getting hooked. I smiled. That fish had more survival instinct than my entire family. I cast the line back out the reel, singing a high, thin note as the lead weight hit the water with a satisfying plop. It had been a week since the wedding. A week since I walked out of the Grand Plaza and drove my old truck into the night. I had not gone back to the office. I had turned off my email notifications. I had spent the days driving, visiting the old neighborhoods where I used to lay brick, eating at diners, where they still served coffee in thick white mugs, and sleeping. Lord, I had slept. The kind of deep, dreamless sleep that only comes when you stop running from the truth. But while I was sleeping, my daughter world was burning down. I knew the details not because I answered the phone, but because David, my assistant, kept me updated. He told me the fallout had been swift and brutal. The FBI had seized Preston assets within 24 hours. The luxury apartment that Maya and Vanessa were so proud of turned out to be leased under one of Preston's shell companies. The rent hadn't been paid in 4 months. The eviction notice was served on Tuesday. I tried to imagine it. I tried to imagine Vanessa watching the movers carry her designer furniture out to the curb. I tried to imagine Maya standing there in her expensive clothes, realizing that she didn't own a single square inch of the floor she was standing on. David told me they were staying at the Starlight Motel on the edge of the industrial district. It was a place I knew well. I had renovated the roof there back in the 90s. The walls were thin, the carpet smelled like stale cigarettes, and the neon sign buzzed all night long. It cost $40 a night. It was a long way from the penthouse. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text message. I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. "Dad, please." "Dad. We are hungry." I stared at the words. Hunger. It was a powerful motivator. I remembered hunger. I remembered eating instant noodles for dinner so Maya could have fresh fruit. I remembered skipping lunch so I could buy her a new winter coat. I had spent my life protecting her from hunger. And look where that had gotten us. I put the phone back in my pocket. I did not reply. If I fed her now, she would never learn how to hunt. I packed up my gear. The sun was getting high and the fish had stopped biting. It was time to go back. Not to save them, but to face them. I knew they would come. Desperation makes people bold, and Maya had run out of options. I drove back to my small house, the one Maya called a shack. It was a simple brick bungalow with a porch and a small yard. It was paid for. It was solid. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw a taxi idling at the curb. The back door opened and Maya stepped out. I barely recognized her. The polished, glowing bride from last week was gone. In her place was a woman who looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot. She was wearing a pair of sweatpants and a stained hoodie. Her face was pale, her eyes sunken and rimmed with dark circles. She looked older. She looked broken. She saw my truck and started running toward the house. She didn't wait for me to get out. She ran up the walkway, her movements frantic and jerky. "Dad," she screamed. "Dad, stop. Do not go inside." I ignored her. I grabbed my tackle box and walked up the steps to my porch. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, closing it firmly behind me. I heard her footsteps pounding on the wood of the porch a second later. Then the banging started. "Dad, open the door," she yelled, pounding her fists against the solid oak. "Please. You have to talk to me. I know you are in there. I saw you." I walked into the kitchen and set my tackle box down on the counter. I filled a glass with water and drank it slowly. The pounding continued, getting more desperate. "Dad, please," she sobbed. "I have nowhere else to go. The motel. They kicked us out." Mom, credit card bounced. "We have been sitting on the curb for 2 hours. I don't have any money for the taxi. He is waiting. He says he is going to call the police if I don't pay him." I walked into the living room and looked at the monitor for the security system. The camera mounted by the doorbell gave me a fisheye view of my daughter. She was slumped against the doorframe, tears streaming down her face. She looked small and pathetic. I pressed the button for the intercom. "You should have thought about that before you got in the taxi, Maya," I said, my voice coming out of the small speaker on the porch. Maya jumped, looking around for the source of the voice. She stared into the camera lens, her face distorted and close up. "Dad," she cried. "Stop punishing me. I get it, okay, I get it. I was stupid. I was wrong. Preston is a crook. You were right. You were right about everything. Now please open the door. I am hungry. I am tired. I just want to come home." "Home," I repeated. "You said this house was a dump, Maya. You said it smelled like old people. You said you were embarrassed to bring your friends here." "I was wrong," she wailed, sliding down to her knees on the doormat. "I didn't mean it. I was just trying to impress Preston." "Please, Dad, just let me in. I will sleep on the couch. I will clean the house. I will do anything." I watched her on the screen. It would be so easy to open the door. It would be so easy to let her in, to make her soup, to tell her it was going to be okay. That is what I had done for 30 years. Every time she fell, I picked her up. Every time she made a mistake, I paid the bill. And that was why she was kneeling on my porch right now, because I had never let her feel the impact of the ground. "I cannot do that, Maya," I said. "Why?" she screamed, hitting the door again. "Why do you hate me?" "I don't hate you," I said calmly. "But I am not your ATM anymore, and I am not your safety net. You are 30 years old. You made a choice. It is not just about a place to stay." "Dad," she pleaded, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. "It is the debts, the wedding vendors, the florist, the band, the venue. They are all coming after me. Preston signed the contracts, but he put my name as the guarantor. They say I owe them $60,000. They are threatening to sue me. They are going to garnish my wages if I ever get a job." She pressed her forehead against the wood. "Dad, you have money," she whispered. "I know you do. You have millions. You bought the building. You paid for the dinner. 60,000 is nothing to you. Please, just write the check. Just make it go away. I promise I will pay you back. I will work for you. I will do anything. Just save me one last time." I looked at the checkbook sitting on my desk. $60,000. It was a lot of money to most people. To me, it was a rounding error. I could write that check in 30 seconds and she would be free. She would be safe. But she wouldn't be saved. If I wrote that check, she would learn that tears and apologies are a currency. She would learn that she can burn down a village and her father will always be there to rebuild it. She would never learn to hold a hammer herself. I leaned closer to the intercom microphone. "I cannot help you with that, Maya," I said. "What do you mean you can't?" she sobbed. "You have the money. Just transfer it. Just wire it to their accounts. It takes 5 minutes." I paused. I let the silence stretch out between us. I let her hear the wind in the trees and the sound of the taxi engine idling at the curb. "I am sorry, Maya," I said, my voice cold and final. "But you told the whole world that I am outdated. You said I don't understand the modern world." "Dad, don't," she begged. "Well," I continued, "I guess you were right. I am just an old bricklayer. I don't know how to use those fancy wire transfers. I don't know how to use digital banking. Those things are for modern people. People who fit the image." "Dad, stop it," she screamed. "Stop mocking me." "I am not mocking you," I said. "I am agreeing with you. You wanted a modern life. You wanted a life of image. Well, now you have the modern problems that come with it, and I am too old and too outdated to fix them. But what am I going to do?" she whispered. "You are going to figure it out," I said. "You are going to get a job, maybe 2 jobs. You are going to negotiate with those vendors. You are going to set up a payment plan. You are going to learn the value of $1 because for the first time in your life you are going to have to earn it. Dad, please." "Goodbye, Maya," I said. I released the intercom button. The connection cut with a sharp click. I watched on the monitor as she stared at the camera. She waited. She waited for the door to open. She waited for the old Luther, the pushover Luther, to come out and save her. But the door stayed closed. After 5 minutes, the taxi driver got out of the car. He was a big man, and he looked angry. He walked up the path and grabbed Maya by the arm. I couldn't hear what he said, but I saw him pointing at the meter. Maya looked back at the camera one last time. Her face was a mask of total defeat. She wiped her nose with her sleeve. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a pair of diamond earrings, the ones Preston had given her for her engagement. Fake diamonds, I knew. But maybe the taxi driver didn't know that. She handed them to the driver. He looked at them bit one to check it and then nodded. He pointed to the street, telling her to get lost. Maya turned and walked down the driveway. She didn't have a car. She didn't have a home. She didn't have a husband. She walked down the street, her shoulders hunched against the wind, looking like a ghost in the midday sun. I turned off the monitor. I walked into the kitchen and sat down at the table. My hands were shaking. Not from age, but from the sheer force of will it took to keep that door locked. I put my head in my hands. I let out a breath that sounded like a sob. It was done. The hardest brick had been laid. Now I just had to wait and see if the structure would hold or if it would crumble. I picked up the phone and dialed David's number. "Boss," he answered on the first ring. "David," I said, my voice thick. "Keep an eye on her. Don't intervene. Don't give her money. But make sure she is safe. If she ends up on the street, find a way to get her into a shelter." "Anonymously." "Understood, boss," David said softly. "You did the right thing." "I hope so, David," I said, hanging up. "I hope so." I looked out the window at the empty street. I was alone in my house. But for the first time in years, the house felt clean. It felt honest. I sat there in the silence and waited for the future to begin. It was a Tuesday evening when the knock came to my door. It was different from the frantic pounding Maya had unleashed a week earlier. This knock was hesitant. It was quiet. It was the sound of a man who was not sure he had the right to be there, but knew he had an obligation to try. I was sitting in my living room reading a book on architectural history, enjoying the silence that had become my new best friend. I put the book down and walked to the door. I checked the monitor, but I think I already knew who it was. I opened the heavy oak door. Connor stood on my porch. He looked different. The expensive tuxedo was gone, replaced by a simple flannel shirt and jeans that looked like they had been bought at a discount store. He had lost weight. His face was pale, and there were shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and hard decisions. But his eyes were clear. The fog of confusion I had seen at the wedding had lifted, leaving behind a sharp, painful clarity. Behind him, parked at the curb where the taxi had been, was a beat-up Honda Civic. It was older than my truck. He didn't try to step inside. He didn't ask for water. He just stood there holding a thick white envelope in his hands, his knuckles white from gripping it so tight. "Mr. Banks," he said, his voice raspy, "I am sorry to disturb you. I know you probably don't want to see anyone from that side of things right now." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "I am listening, Connor." He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I moved out," he said. "I left the apartment on Oak Street the day after the wedding. I took my clothes and my laptop, and that is it. I am staying in a studio apartment over on the east side. It is small. The radiator clanks all night, but I pay for it myself." I nodded slowly. The east side. It was a working-class neighborhood. No doormen, no rooftop terraces. "Good," I said. "It is a start." Connor looked down at the envelope in his hands. He stepped forward, extending it to me. "I got a new job," he said. "I quit the firm I was at. Preston had gotten me that job through one of his connections, and I couldn't stay there. I felt dirty walking through the doors. So I am freelancing now, fixing code for small businesses. It is not much money yet." He pushed the envelope closer to me. "This is $2,000, Mr. Banks. It is everything I have left after the deposit on the studio. I know the wedding cost you over $100,000. I know this is a drop in the bucket. But I calculated my share of the meal and the drinks and the suit rental. I want to pay you back. I will bring you another envelope next month. And the month after that. It might take me 10 years, but I will pay back every cent of my share of that night." I looked at the envelope. Then I looked at the boy. He wasn't doing this for show. There were no cameras here. There was no Maya to impress. He was doing this because he needed to clean his soul. He needed to wash away the stain of complicity. He was offering me his survival money, his food money, just to look me in the eye without shame. I reached out and took the envelope. It felt light, but it carried the weight of a man's integrity. I held it for a moment, feeling the texture of the paper. Then I slipped it into my pocket. "I accept your payment, Connor," I said. Connor let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. His shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you, sir. I just wanted to make it right." He turned to leave. He had done what he came to do. He didn't expect forgiveness. He didn't expect kindness. He just wanted to clear his ledger. "Connor," I called out. He stopped on the top step and turned back. "Yes, sir." Do you drink beer? I asked. He blinked, confused. Excuse me. I have a six-pack of local lager in the fridge, I said, stepping back and opening the door wider. It is not that fancy champagne you were drinking last week, but it is cold, and I bought it with honest money. Connor stared at me. His eyes welled up just a little, but he fought it back. A slow, genuine smile spread across his tired face. I would love a beer, sir. Come in, son, I said. He stepped over the threshold, the same threshold I had barred Maya from. We walked into the kitchen. I handed him a cold bottle. We didn't sit in the formal living room. We went out to the back porch and sat on two plastic lawn chairs overlooking my small garden. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the grass. We sat in silence for a long time, just drinking the beer and watching the light fade. It was a comfortable silence. The kind of silence shared by two men who have been through a war and survived. She calls me, you know, Connor said, quietly breaking the silence. Maya. She calls me 10 times a day. I took a sip of my beer. I assumed she would. She screams mostly. Connor continued staring at the label on his bottle. She blames me for leaving. Then she begs me to come back. She says we can sue you. She says we can sell her story to the tabloids and get rich. She still doesn't get it. She thinks this is just a bad PR moment. She doesn't understand that the foundation is rotten. She never learned to inspect the concrete, I said. She only cared about the paint. Connor nodded. I miss her, Mr. Banks. I do. Or maybe I miss who I thought she was. But I can't go back. I look at her now and all I see is the lie. And I can't build a life on a lie. You did the right thing, Connor, I said. It hurts now. It feels like you cut off your own arm. But that arm was gangrenous. If you had stayed, the infection would have killed you. We clinked bottles. It was a toast to survival. A toast to the painful necessity of amputation. So I asked, shifting in my chair. What have you heard about the others? Connor let out a short, humorless laugh. It is all over the news, he said. You really blew the lid off the whole operation. I leaned back, listening. I knew the broad strokes from David, but I wanted to hear it from the street level. Preston's sentencing hearing was yesterday, Connor said. He took a plea deal. He admitted to wire fraud, embezzlement, and grand larceny. He gave up the names of his partners in the Cayman Islands to try and get a lighter sentence. And I asked. 10 years, Connor said. Federal prison. No parole for at least 8. The judge called him a predator. He said men like Preston destroy the fabric of trust in society. They seized everything. The cars, the watches, even his clothes. He went into custody wearing a prison jumpsuit. 10 years, I mused. That seemed about right. Enough time to think. Enough time to realize that you cannot charm your way out of a cell. And Vanessa, I asked. Connor shook his head, grimacing. That is almost sadder. She lost the condo. It turns out Preston had taken out a second mortgage on it by forging her signature about 6 months ago. The bank took it on Monday. She has nothing, no savings, no assets. All her friends, the society ladies she used to have lunch with, they dropped her the second the news broke. They act like they never knew her. She is working, Connor said, his voice quiet. I saw her yesterday. I was walking past a diner downtown, the kind with the greasy windows. She was in the back. I saw her through the service door. She was wearing an apron covered in food stains, washing dishes. She looked old. All the glamour was gone. She was just an old woman scrubbing plates for minimum wage. I closed my eyes. Vanessa washing dishes. The woman who had left me because my hands were too dirty was now making a living with her hands in dirty water. The irony was so sharp it almost drew blood. I didn't feel happy about it. I didn't feel a surge of triumph. I just felt a deep, profound sense of balance. The universe has a way of leveling the scales eventually. And Maya, I asked, finally asking the question I was dreading. Connor sighed. He took a long pull of his beer before answering. She is famous, Mr. Banks, but not in the way she wanted. He pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times and handed it to me. It was a video on a social media app. The title read, The Cake Bride Meltdown. It had 4 million views. I watched the tiny screen. It was the footage from the wedding. It showed Preston falling into the cake. It showed Maya screaming at me. It showed her running barefoot across the floor, her face twisted in hate. The comments were brutal. Gold digger, daddy's money. She deserved it. Fake tears. She tried to go back to her marketing job, Connor said, taking the phone back. But the company fired her the next day. They said she was a liability to their brand. No other agency will hire her. Her face is a meme. She walks down the street and people point at her and laugh. Where is she? I asked, my voice low. She is staying at a women's shelter on 4th Street, Connor said, the one near the bus station. She ran out of money for the motel. Vanessa couldn't take her in because she is sleeping on a cot in the back of the diner. Maya is alone. She spends her days trying to get the video taken down, but once it is on the internet, it is forever. A shelter. My daughter was in a shelter. I felt a tightening in my chest, a paternal instinct to rush over there to write a check to fix it. Connor saw the look on my face. Don't do it, Mr. Banks, he said softly. I looked at him. I went to see her, Connor said. Before I came here, I offered to help her find a cheap room. I offered to lend her some money for food. And I asked. She spit at me, Connor said. She told me I was a traitor. She told me she didn't want my charity. She said she was going to find a new millionaire. She said she was going to show us all. He shook his head sadly. She hasn't learned, sir. She is still falling. If you help her now, you are just resetting the clock. She needs to hit the bottom, the real bottom. I nodded slowly. He was right. He was wiser than I was at his age. He understood that sometimes love means letting someone break so they can be put back together the right way. You are a good man, Connor, I said. I tried to be, Connor said. I failed for a while, but I am trying again. We finished our beers in the twilight. The air was getting cool. I stood up. You know, Connor, I said, I have a lot of work coming up. I own a few buildings that need retrofitting. New security systems, smart locks, that sort of thing. I need someone who understands code but who isn't afraid to get their hands dirty. Connor stood up too. He looked at me, his eyes widening slightly. Are you offering me a job, sir? I am offering you a contract, I corrected him. Market rate. You do the work, you get paid. No handouts. But I prefer to hire people I can trust. People who pay their debts. Connor smiled. It was a real smile this time. A smile of hope. I would like that very much, Luther. We shook hands. His grip was stronger than it had been a week ago. As he walked down the steps to his beat-up car, I watched him go. I felt a sense of lightness. I had lost a daughter, maybe forever, but I had gained a son. Not a son by blood, but a son by values. And in the end, that is the only family that really counts. I went back inside and closed the door. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the promise of tomorrow, and for an old bricklayer that was enough to build on. The music floating through the air of the community center was not played by a live band costing thousands of dollars. It was coming from an old record player in the corner spinning a vinyl disc that crackled with the warmth of nostalgia. It was a waltz. The rhythm was simple. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It was the heartbeat of a simpler time, and for the first time in months, my own heart was beating in perfect sync with it. I moved across the polished wooden floor, my hand resting gently on the waist of a woman named Clara. Clara was 72. She had silver hair that she wore loose and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. She did not wear diamonds. She wore a simple blue dress that matched her eyes, and her hands were rough just like mine. She was a retired nurse. She had spent 40 years changing bedpans and holding the hands of the dying. She knew what real work was. She knew what real life was. You are a wonderful dancer, Luther, she said, looking up at me with a smile that reached her eyes. You have a very strong lead. I feel safe with you. Safe. The word echoed in my mind. At the wedding, Maya had told me I was outdated. She had told me I was an embarrassment. She had looked at my sturdy frame and saw only a stumbling block to her social ascension. But here, in this room with the smell of floor wax and old coffee, I was not outdated. I was a protector. I was a partner. Thank you, Clara, I said, my voice soft. It has been a long time since anyone told me that. We spun slowly near the window. Outside, the autumn leaves were falling, drifting down to cover the earth in a blanket of gold and brown. It was the season of change. The season of letting go. I looked around the room. There were no influencers here. There were no investors from Dubai. There were no people pretending to be richer or younger or happier than they actually were. There were just people. People with wrinkles that told stories of survival. People with scars they did not try to hide with makeup. I thought about Connor. He was at my office right now working late on a new security protocol for the apartment buildings. He had sent me a text earlier, just a picture of a sandwich he had made for dinner with the caption, "Living within my means." It made me smile. He was learning. He was growing. He was becoming the son I had always wanted, and he was doing it the hard way, brick by brick. I thought about Maya. The pain of her absence was still there. It was a dull ache, like a fracture that acts up when it rains. I knew she was still in the shelter. I knew she was struggling. David, my assistant, told me she had applied for a job as a receptionist at a dental office. Minimum wage, no glamour. I hoped she would get it. I hoped she would learn that there is dignity in answering phones and filing paperwork. I hoped that one day she would understand that the money she earned with her own sweat would taste sweeter than any champagne bought with lies. But I did not call her. For 30 years, I thought that loving my daughter meant fixing her problems. I thought that being a good father meant smoothing the road so she would never stumble. I was wrong. The greatest act of love I ever performed was closing that door and letting her face the storm alone. I had to let her fall so she could learn how to stand up. Clara squeezed my hand, bringing me back to the present. "You went away for a second there, Luther," she said gently. "Everything all right?" I looked at her. I looked at the kindness in her face, a kindness that did not ask for a credit check, a kindness that did not care about the brand of my suit. "I am better than all right, Clara," I said. "I am just grateful. Grateful for what she asked. Grateful that I finally found the right room," I said. The song ended. We stopped moving, but we did not let go of each other. The other couples applauded, a polite, genuine sound that filled the small hall. I clapped too. I was clapping for the music. I was clapping for Clara. But mostly I was clapping for myself. I had spent so much time trying to fit into a world that did not value me. I had tried to squeeze my square peg into the round hole of my vanity. I had accepted the insults. I had accepted the seat by the toilet. I had accepted the role of the outdated relic. But I was not a relic. I was a classic. And classics never go out of style. They just need to be appreciated by people who know the difference between quality and flash. I walked Clara back to her seat and got us 2 cups of punch. It was cheap fruit punch from a plastic bowl, but it tasted better than the vintage wine at the Grand Plaza. We sat and talked. We talked about our gardens. We talked about books. We talked about the peace that comes when you stop chasing things that run away from you. I realized then that I was happy. It was a quiet happiness. It wasn't the manic high of a big deal or the adrenaline of a confrontation. It was the steady warmth of a fire in the hearth. I had my dignity. I had my business. I had Connor, who was rebuilding his life with integrity. And I had this moment right here. I had lost a daughter who loved my wallet, but I had found a life that loved my soul. And as I sat there watching the sun dip below the horizon, I made a promise to myself. I would never again apologize for who I was. I would never again hide my rough hands. I would never again let someone treat me like an option when I should be a priority. I took a sip of the punch and smiled. The old bricklayer had finally finished his own house. And it was solid. It was warm. And the door was open only to those who knocked with respect. I looked at the empty chair next to me, and for the first time, I did not wish Maya was sitting there. I wished her well wherever she was, but I did not wish her here. Here was for people who were real, and I was finally real. The lesson I learned was hard-won. It cost me tears. It cost me money. It cost me the illusion of a perfect family. But it gave me back something priceless. It gave me back myself. We often spend our lives building castles for our children only to realize we raised them to be kings and queens who despise the hands that laid the bricks. I learned that dignity has no price tag, and silence is the loudest scream of a broken heart. You cannot buy respect, and you certainly cannot fake class. If someone is willing to trade your love for an image, let them go. True, family isn't about blood, it is about loyalty. Sometimes you have to let the tower fall so they can finally see who was holding up the foundation. Thank you for listening to my story. It was not an easy one to tell, but it was a necessary one. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to cut off a family member to save yourself? Have you ever been treated like you were outdated by the very people you raised? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one of them. And please tell me which city or country you are watching from. It brings me joy to see how far my voice can travel. If this story touched you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me share more stories of truth and justice. Until next time, remember to check your foundation and never let anyone treat you like a spare part in your own life. Stay strong.